Hi, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of Top Bin Talks presented by FTF Canada. I'm one of the co-hosts. My name is Adam Jones, and I'm going to be joined on this little venture by Kwame Awua. I hope to God I'm pronouncing that right. Jesus.
Nah,
The
you
very
got it.
first
You got it.
episode. Just a little bit of background about us, guys, just to kind of start off with. I grew up in just outside Vancouver, British Columbia. I played most of my career with Coquitlam Metro Ford, was lucky enough to play in a couple national championships as a youth player before eventually going to Simon Fraser University, which is the only NCAA school outside of the US. It's just up on Burnaby Mountain, and we got to play all of our road games in the US. A lot of good fun stories and road trips and stuff. And was lucky enough to be named a first-team All-American in my junior year before eventually settling on, developing a career by being a managing partner at FTF Canada and helping develop some of their events and going through that process. And now here we are starting a podcast. So I'll pass this off to Kwame.
Yes, sir. Welcome everybody to first episode of Top Bin Talks. I'm Kwame Awua. Yes, Adam, you pronounced it right. Originally from Toronto, currently living in St. Louis City, playing for the St. Louis City soccer team, MLS team coming in 2023. I'm so happy that Adam asked me to be part of this let's say venture with FTF, and shout out to FTF as well. What they're doing for the Canadian football scene is totally amazing, totally inspirational, and can't wait to keep this going.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool things that I know Kwame and I talked about when we were kind of developing this and when I was pitching it was kind of bringing a voice to some younger people within the landscape of Canada soccer, but also a current professional. That's kind of one of the things that I'm most interested to hear about a lot of different topics that we bring in and things that we talk about. Obviously, Kwame has firsthand experience and some experience that some other people just might not have who speak on various topics. So super, super excited to learn about that.
Yeah, I hope you guys can enjoy the ride and follow along with all our stories, get to know us a little bit more as we go through each episode. Today we definitely do have a fun episode, more informative episode for you guys. So hopefully you guys enjoy. And we would like to start off by the Canadian women's U20 national team playing in the World Cup.
Yeah, definitely not the results that I think we were looking for. The first two games, two losses, they've gone out. Definitely not what I think everyone was kind of expecting, especially with the profile of some of the players. But it's one of those things. It's tough, man. Like the first game, they didn't play well. They really didn't. It was probably a little bit, as I can imagine, a little bit of jitters, a lot of nerves going into your very first World Cup game. And then they play a French team that they've got infrastructure. Their players are at PSG, and they were the second best team in both games, unfortunately. But phenomenal experience for the girls, and we'll see what they kind of do from here.
Yeah, it's a disappointing situation that happened in the World Cup for the U20 women's team, but history shows us that like our youth teams haven't really done well in these tournaments when it comes to World Cup, which is a bad thing, but not a bad thing as well. Because if you see the progression of the women's game and the men's game, now we qualify for a World Cup coming in Qatar, and the women have just won their first Olympic gold medal. So, and other Olympics prior, they were bronze medalists twice. So, I mean, there's still a bright future ahead for those ladies, and hopefully they take this as a learning experience and can keep progressing in their footballing careers, because clearly there's a landscape for them to get better, and there's still people for them to look up to. So there's still motivation there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like the biggest thing, especially post the French game when they got eliminated, was the discussion around getting a professional women's league here in Canada. And I think part of it is everyone's just kind of throwing it off the cuff, like, oh, we need one, we automatically need one. But I think the conversation is a bit more nuanced than that. Like if you look at the current women's national team, they all played at college. Literally every single one went and played down south and played at college. So in order to increase the player pool, yeah, I think it would be great. But at the same time, when we look at things like infrastructure, we're not going to catch up. We're not going to catch up to really anyone in Europe anymore because they're more or less relying on clubs to do it. And PSG can outspend most
It's USA.
countries. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so like part of the interesting thing would it be better? It's probably a way larger topic, but would it be better to kind of take the MLS model where maybe we have a few clubs that jump into the NWSL first to then try and develop that? Or do we try and jump fully in and create this whole league? Because again, part of that, the current Canadians who are playing in the NWSL aren't coming back to play in this league. That's not happening. Like, it's the start of a league. The pay is not going to be great at the start. We know that. So how many players, and then there's the flip side of the discussion, how many players are going to now take, let's just say $20,000 a year when they get offered a $200,000 scholarship?
And because of obviously we both know the NCAA system, you going to SFU and me going to UConn, because of the NCAA system, where now you can actually get paid from the NIL as well. So it's like I could get a free education. I could play soccer with my peers around my age group at a high level, and at the same time, I can still get paid from advertisements and all that extra stuff. So it's like, why would I want to go back and play in a Canadian Women's Professional League when I can still make it through to the next level going through this way and still have a plan B set up just in case things don't work, like a safety net. So I think it's something that we all have to take. There's a lot of things that we have to take into consideration when we're talking about building a women's league. 100%, like you said, the player pool, that makes total sense to build a player pool. But I definitely think it should take like the MLS model. Like Toronto should have a team. Montreal should, like how we have it for MLS. Like I think that would definitely be beneficial, because it took us. The NWSL was made when, I don't know the exact year when it was created, but it took us 26 years, 25 years to build the CPL after the MLS was founded. So
it's also the third attempt we've had at a professional men's league. Fourth?
Exactly. Yeah, it's not like we didn't have one before.
Yeah, like they've continuously failed. And so that's part of, I think, a little bit more of the nuance. And I think that's kind of one of the things that rubs me the wrong way with a lot of these conversations is it's black and white. And it's really not. Like the idea, we're all trying to get the same endpoint. We're all trying to get we all want the same goal. We all want success. We all want wealth, all these things. But it's a really nuanced discussion in that sense. And again, I think the bigger issue that I found within that wasn't the fact that we didn't have a pro league. It was more or less the infrastructure that the players and the coaches are set up with. Like, I mean, I remember going through, we'd play against youth national teams when we were younger, boys against the girls. And I don't think that's beneficial for them. I don't think it's beneficial for them to be playing in women's leagues as girls. And we kind of saw the result. They got played off the park from a footballing aspect by South Korea and France. That was the biggest thing. The Canadians were pretty much just as athletic. And again, Jade Rose is a stud. She's so good. You can see why she's with the national team. And Zoe Burns is a really good player. But if we're not developing like the football side of it as well, that's where the rest of the world went, because the US were so dominant athletically. Literally the rest of the world went, we're going to go develop footballers. Yes, we need athleticism, but they need to be able to play.
Yeah.
And we've kind of gone away from that based on our infrastructure, where they're not like, there's a side of development where you have to play your own age to get confidence in just yourself and how you play, and everyone develops at different rates.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, they still have one more game left, and it's against Nigeria. I mean, hopefully they can pull out a result and it can leave the World Cup on a positive note. Obviously, there's a lot of things that you want to work on as an individual, as a coaching staff, and as a group, like obviously the group of girls, and then just as a Canadian Soccer Association. We definitely need to look into how we can become better at these youth levels, because then it obviously translates to our full men's and full women's national team. I think we've always had we had youth teams with like 1-2 good players where we're like, okay, these guys are going to be the ones. But like if you look at look at Argentina's youth national U20 men's, obviously when they had Messi, Aguero, like there were so many of them that ended up translating to the first team. Like, how can we get to that level? And I'm not saying it's going to be the same because like we're way far back. Like those guys have been doing this since the beginning of time. But it's like we have to find a model. Like sometimes, like yeah, we want to be ourselves, but sometimes it's okay to take from other places that have been successful. That's what we do all the time as footballers. Like I go watch Messi, I'm like, okay, what can I take from him? Or Marcelo, what can I take from him being a left back? You know what I mean? There's certain things that you could take from other people, but I think it's just a North American probably mind thinking where it's like we got to do everything our way, and our way is the only way that we want to do it. So I don't know. Maybe we can. There can be a different way, but 100%. I think we should be able to take from Brazil, Argentina. Like if we were looking at the top teams, we want to be a top team, and to sprinkle our own Canadian spice in it.
Yeah, well, I think part of the thing that hurts the most about this is that the women are a top 10 program in the world for women. Yeah. That's a huge one. So that's why I think this one hits a little bit harder. But again, I mean, the side of the part of me that sits there, it goes, it'd be great to pull from. I think the thing that we need to pull from those countries is how much time do those under 20 teams spend together?
Mm-hmm.
How often are they training? Because I mean, the U20s, they just qualified not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, oh, they have a camp. Oh, now they're off to the World Cup. And it was like, well, why aren't they spending a lot more time together before that? Because they're all playing at different places, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Like they need to get familiar with each other so they actually know how to play. Like you can't just show up and then be like, okay, well, I hope everyone has the right football intelligence to now set up in this tactical system to play against these teams. Like that's incredibly difficult. And again, this is the biggest thing that I'll go back to. And this is part of the infrastructure that we'll never be able to recreate, especially when it comes to the French and even the English. And even though they were later than us on women's football, it's the culture.
Yeah.
They started doing this 100 years ago, and we've really just started.
Yeah.
And so we're always going to be behind in culture. And unfortunately, a club like Man United, who were the latest possible to get on the women's train, can just throw money at it. And because of their culture, they will surpass us. And that's the reality of it right now. And that's something I think we need to understand. And it's one thing that I actually do look at that's kind of disappointed me a little bit with a lot of CPL clubs is that you've got to now create a culture within your community. I think Halifax have done a decent job at it. I think Forge have done a decent job at it. I think Cavalry have done a good job of it. And I think Pacific have started to. I think they're a little bit trapped with their population.
Yeah.
But man, I look at the Whitecaps and I'm like, how are you guys not more? How can you guys not be more ingrained in the culture here? And you know, like it's just one of those things that if we don't do that, we are never gonna catch up remotely close because they're there. That's people who live there. That's their lives.
Yeah. I feel like we had the conversation about it, and obviously it's a whole different topic. We talked about this off there. I just feel like in North America, because football is not our only sport, people's attentions are taken away from football. So it's always like, okay, basketball is on. Okay, I don't like NFL is on. Okay, I don't. Why am I gonna watch? You know what I mean? So I feel like there's just so much going on in North America where like it's football season, and then I mean they have like cricket and all those other stuff. Like if you like rugby and like it's football. Once football's done, it's like everybody, including the players, takes that 2 months off in the summer. And when football's back, say, all right, everybody like let's rejoin again. Like we're back at it again. So I think that's another thing that comes to. But that's a different conversation. Hopefully they can finish off with the win, end off on a high note, and just like them competing at a World Cup, we have our own World Cup less than 100 days away in Qatar 2022. I'm hella excited. I feel like the last time we talked about it was like, damn, it was an afterthought. But now it's like, oh, wow, we're almost at the end of August. Like we have 3 months, 2 months, 3 months? Yeah. So
yeah,
hopefully all the players are excited. Hopefully the country's excited. It seems like all the country's excited. And here we're about to talk about where do we think Canada will finish?
Yeah. So hot take time, Kwame. Where predict? You got to predict right now. Where's Canada finish?
I say, barring no injuries, and we have, like, let's say we have the team that we had in qualification, I say we can go to round of 16. Now I don't know how I think they could get out of the group stage. I don't know how the order of the knockout stages, like who plays who. So I'll say round of 16 right now to be safe. But when I do more research, we'll see who they can end up playing, so and so. So, but I definitely do think Belgium is a lot, and then I think Canada can be a menace to Croatia just because of the age difference as well, right? We have energetic players that are promising, are together, and like Croatia might have more of the ball, but who's gonna catch us on the counter attack? And it's not like we can't keep the ball either. So we have guys that are willing to express themselves, especially at the highest stage. Guys are hungry. So I definitely think we got what it takes. Round of 16, yeah.
All right. I don't
How
think
about
they
you?
get out of the group.
You don't think
I
they get out
don't.
the group?
No.
It's
And
what?
here's the biggest reason why. And this is something that not many people have considered so far. And this is what scares me even more about Belgium. And again, this is barring no injuries.
Mhm.
Everyone's fit.
Mhm.
This is the first World Cup where those European players haven't had a full season under their legs.
Mid-season.
So now they're fit mid-season.
Ooh,
So you don't have and the biggest thing, you look at some of the Canadians. Alistair Johnson's going to play a full year. Osorio, all the MLS guys have except for Richie. Richie's the only MLS guy who won't. They all have a full season under that. They're not in mid-season form.
Yeah, but you're gonna have
is what
Alphonso
always
Davies in
you do.
mid-season
You've got
form.
Fonzie,
Yeah,
you've got Jonathan.
yeah,
You do.
Jonathan, yeah.
You do.
But yeah,
But we don't like the European teams. They're like again, and this is again, we just saw Luka Modric at the end of a season against Thiago and Fabinho.
Yeah.
And he was unbelievable, man. Like he was so good. And it's one of those things that I look at. I think the group, for me personally, I could not care less as long as they don't get blown out by Croatia and Belgium. I don't care if they finish last in the group and they're competitive and they keep games close. It's a massive win for me. Like they weren't supposed to qualify. Like without COVID, they didn't qualify for the Hex.
Yeah.
So COVID pushed it to an octagon, and they had to play a playoff with Haiti. Like they were not supposed to qualify for this tournament at all. And then the run through the octagon, they winning the group, like putting everyone on notice. This is a win, man. As long as they don't go in there and Kevin De Bruyne doesn't do some foolishness and embarrass them, like it's a win. It's a win for me. I hope everyone kind of tempers their expectations a little bit like that, where they're just going to enjoy. We're not looking to expect anything here because again, like you even look at De Bruyne right now, he's just he's on cruise control in the best league in the world. Like it just looks so easy for him. And so that's the way I look at it. I'm thinking I don't think they get out the group.
We forget it's Morocco's in the
Absolutely.
group. In the group
Morocco's
too, right?
good, man.
Oh yeah,
Morocco's like
I forgot.
There's no easy, like that's the thing. Like they could finish last, but if they can go toe to toe and say they lose 2-0 to Belgium, oh my God, you're telling me that not everyone else isn't gonna be, oh holy shit, they host in 4 years? Like and again, it's the group's first World Cup in 36 years, something like that. Long time. First World Cup in a long time. Most of them, this is the first real major tournament experience that many of them will have. Besides, Davies has gone deep in the Champions League. Jonathan David they got out of the group stage, but by and large, Davies and Atiba are the only ones with a significant amount of tournament experience. And again, the thing that worries me the most, for me, their most important player, the player that makes them tick the most, is Stephen Eustáquio. He's not playing. He's not playing. He's not going to play for Porto this year. That's why I love what Richie did. Richie came back and he's playing every minute. He needs to be game shape. Jonathan David not leaving. Awesome. Keep playing every minute. Eustáquio's not. And that scares the hell out of me.
You know what? Now that you said that, because I remember I was literally having this conversation with a guy on my team, and we were like, wow, this is going to be the first World Cup where guys are in mid-season form. Like, And I was saying, like, look at what Neymar is doing at PSG. Look what Messi's doing at PSG. I'm like, these guys usually come in with like 50, 60 games on their legs, and they're like, damn, I have to build it up another level because my country might snipe me. And like, I have no excuses. Like, I have to show up. But now they're like, yo, I can come in mid-season, perfect fitness, like running games, I could be in top form, and then play this World Cup, come back and I have bragging rights right after. Like, there's no break. So you literally just come back to your club, like, yo, I just whooped you in the World Cup. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have bragging
Yeah,
rights. There's no vacation. You're going back at it. Yeah, I forgot that it was mid-season. And
that's
then
a like,
the weather too could be a thing too. Like Morocco, those guys being played, like those guys are from that weather.
mhm.
And then yeah, and keeping the ball is going to be an essential part, especially with the temperatures down out there. Because I've been to Qatar, and I went to Qatar in like in March, early March, and that was like 50 degrees Celsius. So I
Yeah,
would say like what 35, and that's
yeah.
still hot in comparison.
And we've already
So
conceded that they're going to have less of the ball against two of the three teams.
yeah, I don't know, man. I just know if they're able to defend well, anything can happen. But
Yeah, oh,
hey,
100%. And that's the thing
yeah,
that's what's so
just don't get
electrifying
blown
about the
out.
group. That's
Yeah,
the electrifying
yeah.
part about the group though. Like if they get through, am I going to be
Mhm.
surprised? Not really.
No,
I could 100% I could see that happening, but I could also see them finishing last in the group.
last. Yeah.
But
No,
that's the thing. I just don't want them to get blown out. That's about it. Because anything else, it is a colossal win for the group.
okay. Okay. So
And that
out of the current yeah, out of the current roster right now, who do you think would be a wild card to get called up to
if I had to
the
pick
Canadian?
one player to get called into this group, and it
Mm,
purely comes down to how I think just it's probably it's not their best position. It's just probably why they're going to end up playing with three of them. I got Joel Waterman's getting called in for me. He's been unbelievable for
mm.
Montreal this year. He's played more than Kamal has.
Yeah.
He's played a
Kamal,
lot of minutes. He's played really well, and they need another center back. They need another center back in that group, in
mhm,
my opinion. And I think, and Joel can play with on either side. He's proved it at Montreal this year. He can play on the right,
mhm,
play on the left. I don't know that he can play directly central.
mhm.
Mind you, I don't know how many can play as one-on-one with Lukaku. So I don't know that Vittori's going to have a great time with that.
Mhm,
But Joel would be my wild card who hasn't been, he's in the pool, but he hasn't been in a recent camp that I think
mhm.
is going to get called in. As long as he stays healthy and keeps performing the way he is, I think he's someone he has to get called in.
Um, my wild card, I actually really haven't thought about it, but like I know one of my homies, Raheem Edwards, has gotten called in. Plays at almost every game, every minute for LA Galaxy, doing really well. I think he has about 7 assists in MLS. First like 5 games, he had like 4. He was on a tear.
He's been
Um,
fantastic this year.
yeah, suffered a minor injury, came back, but he's good now. I recently watched a game against the Whitecaps. He played really well, so it's nice to see my boys doing well. So I would say Raheem. The
I can
goalkeeping situation the goalkeeping situation is a good one to look at as well, though. It's Maxime Crepeau, LAFC, best team in the league right now. Starts every game. Obviously, you have the Serbian Warrior, Czech Republic Warrior,
Orion.
Boyan, you know what I mean? The Warrior. And then you have Dame St. Clair, who was recently obviously named the MLS All-Star alongside Kamal. So, but then there's other goalkeepers that have been called in and out by John Herdman. So that's another situation to keep an eye on as well. Who's going to be the number two? Who's going to be the number two is the most intriguing one. Even though
Yeah,
nobody really don't really think about the number two goalkeeper, but like being the number two goalkeeper is like you never know what can happen, right? So that's
for
another thing
sure.
to keep an eye on.
For sure. No, I
Definitely another thing
think
to keep an eye on.
that battle between Crepeau and Dane is going
Mhm.
to be interesting too.
Yeah.
Because he never like the stuff can happen at any time, man. Like everyone's got to be ready now, step in and jump in and be ready to go. I like the Raheem show. I think
Mhm.
Raheem was probably a close second for me, and one of the reasons why he's left-footed.
Yeah.
Like if you look at all the like, yeah, okay, we got Fonzie and Sam.
Sam.
and I think Scott Kennedy is too.
Yeah, but
So we only have
he's not a
three.
left wing back.
He's not, but at least
Uh,
and
left,
Kamal, sorry.
come
So,
on, yeah,
but even that's your whole team though. Those are all the
yeah.
left-footed players in the entire team. So it is
Mhm.
nice now that you add someone else.
Oh,
And
Mark
again,
Anthony, you have Mark
oh
Anthony.
yeah,
Yeah,
Mac is too. So
yeah, Mac is.
like it's really good. Like the more you can have them on that side, and especially like again, if
Mhm,
you say you're gonna go and we're gonna be really defensive.
mhm.
Raheem's another person where if you go Sam, run your lungs out for 60 minutes. Go for 60.
Yeah, and then Raheem
Raheem, you're
comes in,
coming
he
on.
can
Here
run
you
his
go.
lungs. Yeah, run
30
your
minutes,
lungs out
go,
too.
go, go. And so when you can kind of replace players with those like-minded players, especially if you're like, oh my God, we're gonna get a result here.
Mhm.
It's one thing to change a bunch of players, but if you can make these little tiny adjustments in those spots with again a left-footed player like-minded and they know the system, it's kind of perfect for
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Joel Waterman is definitely a good shot. Obviously, I watch a lot of those games because like Kamal and a lot of other guys. David Schwanier's brother Matthew is also there as well. Yeah, he from playing against him in Calvary, I always thought he was a solid center back. His rise is meteoric to me because I never, I thought he was like a good solid center back, the sale to Montreal was just random to me. I didn't think he was never. I knew he could play at MLS level, but I never like in my head. It was like if Montreal's looking for a center back, I never thought they'll go to Calvary. You know what I mean in my head? Because usually they have the reputation of going out and buying players or buying. You know what I mean? So I never
Well,
thought they
at
would go to
the
the
time
CPL, but
too,
it's
they
a
did.
plus.
Like you had Laurent Simon, who they bought
Yeah, that's
previously. He
what I
was at the
mean.
World Cup. They brought in Camacho and stuff. But that's one of the things though that I honestly look at that situation and I sit there and I go, what are Montreal doing differently here where they can bring Joel in? Joel had to learn how to defend as a center back. He did
Mm-hmm.
because he was still
Mm-hmm.
pretty raw at CPL
Mm-hmm.
and like any young player, you saw it the first year with Henri, where he made
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. He did.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually asked him once, I'm like, how do you not smile when Thierry Henry is just screaming at you, thinking, how do you listen to any word he says instead of just thinking, oh my God, it's Thierry Henry?
Mm-hmm.
But he just said, and
Yeah.
then I think like they've taught him how to defend. It's one of those things that I look at TFC with now. You have Jaquil who's playing right back for the first time ever.
Mm-hmm.
You got to teach him how to
Mm-hmm.
defend. Same thing
Mm-hmm.
with Cozy. Like you have to
Mm-hmm.
teach these kids how to defend. It's the same thing with the Whitecaps. Like when
Mm-hmm.
Sam was there, that was probably Sam's biggest deficiency was that they went, well, defensively, he's not quite
Mm-hmm.
that sound. And then he leaves, he goes to Brighton and he goes through Europe and he learns how to defend. And now you look
Mm-hmm.
at him and you're like, that's where I think some of the Canadian players lose a little bit is where they're just not,
Mm-hmm.
they need to be taught how to do it. I think it might be something on the player, it might be something on the coaching staff. I'm not sure, but I know Joel's a really learned kid and he's a
Mm-hmm.
really, really smart person. So
Yeah.
he's clearly taken whatever they're telling him and he's applying it. And
Mm-hmm.
again,
Then
man, like
confidence.
confidence is huge
Mm-hmm. Then
and
confidence.
opportunity.
It's working. Yeah.
There were some injuries. He took his opportunity and he's ran with it, and he's been phenomenal. He's the one that I look at and I go, they need a little more height at center back too,
Mm-hmm.
because he's bigger, he's taller than Daniil,
Mm-hmm.
not as
He's like
wide,
what
but
six? He's like 6'3", 6'2", 6'3".
yeah, something about that.
Yeah.
So again, when you look at the height back there, especially because Kamal's undersized, but
Mm-hmm.
you've got Scott Kennedy, you've got him, and you've got Vittoria who are tall. And again, if you're going to sit and defend, you're going to bring on a lot of pressure and a lot of crossing, and you're going to need guys in there you need some big boys in there to deal with the likes of Lukaku and Rebic. I don't think we can look
Yeah.
past Croatia with
Yeah.
Rebic.
Yeah. He turned up this weekend. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But now
then, let's shift to a little bit of an MLS recap.
yeah. All right. So as you know, you mentioned it, Richie,
Your boy back
to Toronto FC. I kind of knew this was going to happen actually, because we're part of the same agency as well. But shout out to Axia Sports Management, bang. But yeah, back to Toronto FC. Great move for him. Yeah, everybody always mentions like he needs minutes before the World Cup, and that is 100%. You need minutes, you need to play, you need to maximize the amount of games that you can get before the World Cup, especially if you're the starting right back going into the 2022 World Cup for Canada. But I think one of the most important things that helps his transition back to TFC is his comfort in the surroundings. Him coming back to his hometown after going into England, obviously a new experience and everything, he enjoyed it from what he has told me, like from what he shows me. He's enjoyed it. The coaches and coaching staff in Nottingham believed in his ability. It's not like he didn't get a run of games. Came in January when everyone was in mid-season form. So he had to pick up his steam. Like he just finished a whole season with TFC and then had to go into another level physically because the championship is running gun most of the time after if you watch the games.
They also play 65 games a year.
65 games. Yeah, it's for like 40
Insane.
games in for like just a regular season, then plus playoffs and all that. So just trying to keep your body in tune. But coming back home, it was a good thing for his family. Most importantly, good thing for his missus. Good thing for him mentally. He's able to come somewhere where he's beloved by the fans. And as you can see from this first 2-3 games, 3 assists, team of the week, he's back in business, man. I mean, people are saying maybe the MLS is too easy for him and maybe he should go back. I'm like, nah, like sometimes you just put in a situation where you thrive the most. And he's thriving right now. So it's nice to see him back. TFC is definitely very happy to have him back. It was a last-minute loan. He was panicking. I was panicking for him, and I'm happy that they got this done. So that's all I can say.
I love it.
Mhm.
I think we actually spoke about this before when I think Richie had gone back for preseason, where I was like, he's leaving, right? He's leaving. He's got to go because he's not gonna. He's getting. And my whole thing was, it's not that I didn't think he'd get game time.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was gonna happen because again, Nottingham Forest are coming up. They sold Jed Spence. They're now in buy mode. And they did. They bought Nico Williams from Liverpool. They started buying all these guys, which every team who comes up has to do because they want to stay in the Prem. And I thought over time, I think Richie would get a chance and he'd play. But it being a World Cup year, he couldn't go a full year without a serious run of games. Because then now all of a sudden he's and not for his own sake, because I think he'd learn a ton in training at that level and getting to watch it would be incredible. But how are you now going to sit there and go, I should be playing over, say, Tejan, who's played all year, played in the Champions League. You haven't played for a full year, you know? And so when you kind of weigh it up there, like he comes back and now again gets to play with Bernadeschi and Insigne, and he gets to play with these guys. And you can see, man, like, I don't think there's anything about the level not being good enough for him. I think he's going, no, I'm getting ready for a World Cup. You have to be selfish in these moments, man. Like you've got to be, I'm doing this for this reason. And that's what I'm doing. And it was almost the same thing that he did when he went there. No, I dreamed of playing there. I'm going. Awesome. And I hope he gets another chance to go back. I just think that it being a World Cup year, he's got to play because we need him to play. We need all of them to be at their sharpest. And the nice thing is, Richie's going to be in not quite mid-season form because they're going to have a bit of a break. Potentially not, I guess, because if TFC look the way they're going, they might go deep.
They'll go straight into they might go deep and then they'll go straight into a camp. So
exactly. So he's going to be in mid-season form. So that's I loved it. I loved everything about that. And then again, a couple more World Cup boys with Dane and Kamal going to the All-Star game.
Yeah, man. I was also happy for them. Dane has been he's been helping Minnesota steal some games. Some games is because of him, just pure like reaction saves, like highlight reel saves. And I've known this about him for a long time. But I'm happy that like Minnesota has finally given him the keys to the car. You know what I mean? And Kamal, probably he's probably captain consistent. You know what I mean? He never really tails off. He never really has a bad game. He's always solid, plays his game always, and he's you feel his personality on the field. He's more of an aggressor, aggressor. Like he's barking orders. He's like he moves like a captain, but he's obviously not the captain. But I mean, captain consistency, like, and they definitely deserve to be called up to the All-Star game for what they've done for their clubs. And
and they've grown into their roles, man. Like they're two kids who kind of came in. I think they came in the same year. I think they got drafted the same year, and they it was that same thing where again Kamal wasn't given the green light right away by Orlando, and Dane wasn't given the green light right away by Minnesota, and they grew into it. They proved they belonged, and then they made their leaps, man. Like, and they're it's paying off massively. Dane was the MVP.
Yeah, I
Like,
watched some of the game, and it was a solid game, and it's a testament to the level of the MLS and compared to Liga MX, right? Because now you have a lot of guys leaving the Mexican league to come to the MLS because is the level that far off? You don't know, right? It's not like it was like 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
it's definitely getting closer, and we can talk about that. We can do a little ranking of North American leagues and stuff. And then last one, pretty big news. Obviously, Easton Ungaro signed a short-term deal and made his debut with the Whitecaps against LA Galaxy.
Yeah, I'm extremely proud. I'm extremely happy for him playing against him when he was at FC Edmonton. Obviously, when I was at Forge, I mean, no offense, FC Edmonton, but like he was like their only threat. 6'6". We used to make jokes with him on the field. I'm like, man, why don't you just go play basketball or something? Go be a wide receiver or something. But he's elusive, left-footed. I feel like he's one of those guys that hit his growth spurt late. So he got all his technical ability when he was shorter, and then boom, hit a growth spurt. It's like, damn, now this guy's a left-footed Canadian Ibrahimovic.
We're still waiting for our growth spurt, Kwame.
Yeah, man. I knew I was gonna be my height at 13 years old. I gave up on that. So I just like, hey, let me just focus on footy. But I'm happy for him. I watched the game against LA Galaxy. He got a 45-minute run out. Tough game.
I think he was unlucky to come off. I watched it too.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it. I was like, you gave the kid the debut, and now you need goals.
Yeah. Especially when you're down that, like that's when you start playing more direct, and they took off one of their threats. But that's neither here or there. I'm happy that he got his opportunity playing at, what is it called? StubHub still? Is it called StubHub, or did they change the name to, like, I don't even know. But playing at that arena, I've had great memories playing at that. Against LA Galaxy, playing against Giovanni Dos Santos, Alessandrini, Ola Kamara, Jonathan Dos Santos. So I mean, that's a nice place to play. So I'm happy that he got in. It was in LA, and hopefully there's many more to come. He's been killing it with the second team, 4 goals in 3 games. So he definitely deserved the opportunity.
No, for sure. No, super happy for him. And it's just, again, expanding the player pool. Got to keep expanding, and we got to keep trying to see more and more players in these scenarios and in these situations, because if we keep the status quo, we're going to fall behind. So that was awesome. And then shifting to CPL, playoff race is starting to tighten up a little bit here. Top 5 are reasonably close, with Forge and Pacific leading the way. Yeah,
I mean, I've watched a couple of games. Busy with my season here, but any games I have the chance to watch, definitely tune into. Pacific do play their CONCACAF League game tonight at Starlight Stadium. Historic, as you can see. It's Herediano. I think that's the name, how you pronounce it. But
I think so.
It should be a really good game. That's a really good side. But yeah, Forge being Forge, Pacific being Pacific. I think personally, and then third was what, Calvary? Those have always been the top 3 since the CPL started, and like I said, testament to the foundation that they've built and how the clubs are run. Well-run clubs, well-coached clubs, and players are very talented, and they just keep pushing the envelope for Canadian soccer, right? So I think, like you said, expanding the player pool, getting people out there, getting people to notice that there's more to Canadian players than the ones that are in MLS academies. So that's an important thing as well.
Yeah, massively. And I think like that would be the one thing that, again, for me, if I'm strictly looking at CPL, I think that's the one thing that I would like to see them do even better at. Is too many times, like if you do look at Pacific, I don't think you can find a Vancouver kid who wasn't at the Whitecaps. And so that's one thing that I do look at. I'm like, they missed out on Joel. And so did Pacific, because he went to Calgary. So there are other kids in that. And again, when we look, and I've watched a lot of those games online, and then I was lucky enough, I went and saw you guys play against Whitecaps too. It's different. It's a lot. It's a different type of game. And again, part of it, not necessarily with Whitecaps too, but with you guys, your team's full of men. It's full of men. It's not, there's a certain maturity to it. And I think we've seen that with CPL where again, Wiro Diaz just got sold. He's a man. He's not a kid. You look at Joel. When Joel got sold, Joel was a defender. Caden got sold, defender. McNaughton got sold, defender. Absy gets sold, defender. I don't think it's a coincidence that the defenders are getting sold, mainly because the older players that people typically sign are the attackers. Like your attackers are typically a little bit older, or because you look at Pacific Bustos, very good player. But if you're consistently playing against the other team's better players who are older, that's a higher indicator that you can go and play at the next level. So unfortunately, when I look at it and you say you have all these 18, 19-year-old fullbacks, doesn't matter if someone torches them. They're 18, 19. Like for me, the league to truly get to a different level, especially if they're looking at getting, which I hope the goal is to get to the USL Championship level, because I think it's a very good level. You need men. It needs to be a men predominant league. Not that those men are gonna, because the men are the ones who are gonna get sold. No, your younger players, you want them to come in and show what they can do against men, rather than against another 19-year-old, because that's not going to show someone at a USL level. Soccer. Yeah. Exactly. Right. So it's that idea that, again, like, can we expand this player pool to include more players? And again, there's the other side of the argument is anyone who's that age isn't going to play for that kind of money. And that's a completely fair argument. Yeah. And I'm just saying the long-term growth of that league is going to be dependent on the age, because you can't have this young league, because now all of a sudden, I mean, are the MLS teams that they go, well, the league's the same age as our MLS Next Pro. We can keep them in our system, and there's no reason for us to loan them out anymore. Yeah,
100%. And just being an MLS Next Pro in comparison to CPL, you have a lot of guys that have come from college. So guys are already 23, 22. Like, yeah, they don't have the games, professional games, like some of these youth from, like, let's say Forge or York 9, whatever, like 18, 19 years old have, but they have that like maturity, like they develop through the college system. They might not be as talented, but to play the game at the highest level, obviously we both know that it's not always talent. You have to have a knack for the game. You have to have a feel for the game. Certain situations, like one mistake can be detrimental to your team, and like if you limit those mistakes as you get older. And because those guys are still young, that they're still making those mistakes. But yeah, because you're playing a lot, you're making those mistakes. But now when you get to this age, it's like, hey, how do I limit these mistakes? And
mistakes get punished more against men.
Yeah, against men.
When you play against men, it gets punished. When you play against other kids, they might just make a different type of mistake that then fizzles, whatever they were trying to do fizzles out. And exactly. I mean, a good example that you said is Kyle Hybert. He is a beast. Oh my God. That was my first time really getting to watch him live. He was unbelievable.
Kyle Hibbert, beast.
He's an unbelievable player, man. He's unreal. Beast, and he's playing up against defensively solid, good on the ball, super simple, and exactly what you're looking for. Like he's not trying to be anything he's not. And that's, I think, a big part of the maturity factor is understanding what your role is, understanding what you need to do to succeed and to help your team succeed. And that was actually my favorite thing about that whole game was everyone moved as a unit, especially for you guys. I thought the Whitecaps actually did a pretty good job of that once the first team guys went off, because those guys don't train with Whitecaps too. Like there's no way they do. I thought they're, when they had their group, I thought, you know what, for a young team, it's pretty good. Like they definitely threatened in the second half a little bit, but you guys just moved so well together, and you could tell you're like, yeah, that's a group of men who understand. They understand how each other move, and you could tell the most glaring difference was the maturity, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm happy that you got to come out to watch the game. The field wasn't the best where they played.
There was a so they just had, I know they had the BC League One finals there, and actually I didn't tell you this, but the night before I had a couple of friends who were sending me some stuff. They had like a craft beer festival literally on the field the day before. There's the
Look at this.
stage with a band. Like
Yeah.
I saw it the night before. I was killing myself laughing. And I forgot I was actually gonna
I,
send you a text with it. I was dying though. They have all these people
yeah.
walking all over the field and stuff. It was hilarious.
I was like, this don't make any sense, but I mean, it is what it is. Yeah, when we went up 3-1, and like, we could take it off that MLS X Pro, but like when we went up 3-1, I was like, and I got into the game, I was okay. Like, we don't really need to score right now, and like that's what, and like you said, it comes to maturity. It's like, okay, when we just move the ball as much as possible, we can still create chances and just keep it away from our net, not giving them an opportunity. And we got in after the game, and our coach told us that Whitecaps only had one shot on goal, and that was their goal. And I was like, damn, it didn't feel like that because of how often like they were trying to like get in behind us and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a solid game overall. But
Yeah,
back to the
they had a couple
CPL,
they had a couple half chances, but apart from
yeah,
that, you guys just you kept them at bay really well.
yeah. But back to CPL, you mentioned it, Mauro Diaz sold to a Norwegian club. Um, like you said, playing against him, he's always been a very smart technical striker, really good goal scorer. He was the top goal scorer before he left the CPL with 13 goals this year. He was a big part, massive part for the development and like just the attacking togetherness with Bustos, Manu Aparicio, and Josh Hurd and those guys. So I want to see how they fare without him for the rest of the year. It's definitely a big hole to fill, and hopefully someone can step up for them. And I mean, they got Bustos. They gave Bustos his number 10, the captain, and everything. So I'm hoping like he can step up and take his game to the next level, right? So
For sure,
this is
for
an
sure. And it
opportunity
looks
for
it
him and
looks like
manager.
Josh is gonna play central now. I think
Mhm.
that's the obvious replacement, unless someone else who's on the bench might be able another one who might be able to come in. But obviously Josh has games under his legs, and that's the thing. Like
Mhm.
you're mid-season now, they're trying to battle it out for, to be top of the table. That you kind of have to run with your horses at this point, unfortunately. And then
100%.
also, speaking of Pacific, Matthew Baldissimo leaves Pacific. He goes to York on loan, and Cedric Toussaint goes back the other way. I think Pacific actually bought him. I
Oh,
think that's the way
really?
that, yeah, they bought him and they sent Baldy on loan. And then York also add Mo Babuli back in the league, your ex-teammate.
Yeah, man, that's a great pickup for York United. When I heard that had happened, I was like, I wasn't surprised, but I was still surprised. Mo has Jordan Wilson, who was a really good friend of his on York United, a captain. It's closer to home for Mo. I mean, I guess so. It's like in between. But yeah, Mo, as everybody knows, played for TFC, really decorated player, League One Ontario MVP that has done all of that. Played in what was it, Dubai or Qatar? But he went to the Middle East, played in the Middle East for a little bit, has been called up to the Syrian national team. One of my homies played with him. He was playing left wing, I was playing left back, dynamic duo. Probably the best ever Force team that didn't win the championship to qualify for the CONCACAF Champions League run that we were on. He was an integral part of it, just like everybody else. But he's a big game player, and that's a big signing for York United. He's one of those guys that knows he's him. You know what I mean? Like, he's one of those guys that walks on the field. He's like, yo, I'm the best player on the field. And 8 out of 10 at times he shows it. And the other 2 times it might be just a bad day, but I have nothing but love for him. And I know he's going to do well. And then Jordan Hamilton signed into Hamilton.
Yeah, Hamilton and the
Yeah,
Hammer.
man. Yeah, so that's another big pickup for Forge. They're kind of busy at that number 9 spot now because you have Emery Welshman, Taryn Campbell, Jordan Hamilton, and Rubens Passius, who's been killing it also in the CPL.
Yeah.
So we'll see how all that works out. But Bobby loves the rotating his attacking guys, and it gives them motivation to, when they are on the field, they give their best. So
they kind of have to now. Yeah, like
yeah.
training now. I cannot imagine what training must be like for
Pressure's on.
goalkeepers there now, because now you've got, and Jordan's already off the mark.
Mm-hmm.
Already off the mark,
Exactly.
which is awesome for him. He got off the mark. Taryn's been having a good year too. and Passius is just.
Yeah.
Again, now this actually, I think kind of the interesting thing is I think everyone's kind of got used to Forge and Bobby playing a certain way. And this kind of gives them a little bit of leeway now to change it up. Where if it's a matchup thing, oh no, we're gonna go 2 up front.
Yep.
Both your center backs deal with these 2. And then you can throw the next 2 on. So that'll be interesting, I think, down the stretch, because I think that if I think, everything's kind of a learning experience, but I think that's the only thing that you guys lacked last year in that final, where, albeit Cali stood on his head. Cali was unbelievable in goal.
100%.
Cali was ridiculous.
These guys had 1 shot, 1 goal.
He was fantastic. But again, it was more or less like the way you guys tried to break them down was the same way every single time, because it's what you guys do. But there wasn't like that option now to come on and go, oh, that changes the equation now and stuff. And I think
there wasn't a set piece threat, like the height of Jordan, the height of Rubens, like.
Yeah,
we didn't really have that.
Even in that, like Wubens was in that game and stuff, and it was like, okay, well, you guys won so many set pieces, but it wasn't like, okay, well, they can now McNaughton can line up with Wubens, no problem.
Yeah,
and they could match up. If you throw Jordan on there now, and now you have you have all these different guys, it's more or less of a matchup nightmare of how are we going to beat you now? We can beat you A, B, C, or D, or rather than just A or B. So I think like that's one of the things, at least that I've noticed this year from Forge, because sometimes before I watch them, I'm like, oh my God, they're bopping people off the park. They've beat teams different ways this year. So I think that's one of the things that I've looked at and go, okay, that looks like that. Oh, great. Yeah, they're taking another step.
Yeah, they're still missing. They're still playing guys out of position as well. They have Alex Achinoti Johnson playing center back, was a starting 6 for the last 3 years when I was there. And we're missing Daniel Crutzen, who's been the best center back in the league for the last 3 years as well. So, I mean, hopefully he should be coming back soon as well. So, like, what happens then, right? He's come back from his ACL injury. Obviously, he's probably going to need some games, some time to recoup what he left. But it's only up from here for everyone, for Mo at York, for Matthew Baldissimo, who's a really good player, technical player, smart player. Cedric, who's a busy midfielder, playing against him, like he active, good at moving the ball, box to box midfielder. So I mean, players are going where they're going to play and where they're wanted, and hopefully it can kick their game into the next gear.
Yeah, and then just really quickly before we move on from that, Atletico have taken huge strides this year. Huge strides. They've really found, I think they was kind of building from last year where they were kind of trying to build that defensive identity and just went through some growing pains, whereas this year they've been very good. They've been way better defensively. Good talent going forward. And then Valor are knocking on the door. Valor are some like 6 points back, I think, of Atleti in the 4th spot. So that's kind of heating up. So it'll be really interesting. Obviously now in mid-August, season's winding down to an end. It's going to be an interesting little run in here.
Yeah. One thing about Atletico, before we move on, I knew their pickups this offseason have been very integral. Like they picked up Ollie Bassett, who's a good playmaker. They picked up Maxime Tissot, who's one of the best locker room guys that I've ever been around. Like one of the best,
one
of the best guys. Yeah, best guys I've ever been around. True professional. Like he's competitive as, excuse my language, but like competitive as fuck. And he always tries to bring the best out of everyone, playing or not playing. But now he's starting the starting left back. I feel like Atletico, obviously from their inaugural year, 2020, that's very tough for them to try to build a team in 2 weeks. I feel like they went from individuals to more of a team environment, and that's a testament to the coach. That's a testament to all the players that are there, because now I feel like they're all more connected. When I was at when we played Atletico Ottawa, I knew when I was there, I was like, this is gonna be a dub, because there's a lot of individuals. You're like, okay, you take Ryan Telfer out the game, you take this guy out the game, and then they don't really have much. But now I feel like they're more connected. Oh, they also got Kevin Alaman from Valor. So you know what I mean? They got some talent there. So and Valor's always
Ballou's
there too
from Montreal. So yeah, and actually
is he on loan?
Sold? He's either on loan or he went there. I don't remember quite what that one was, but yeah. And I think like one of the things you say there about about Max. I think it's one of the most unique things about some players, and what we really, really don't do a good job of in this country is that ability to bring the best out of others. If you can make the other players around you better, that is such a valuable asset to have as a footballer, regardless of what it is, whether it's just by being a substitute. I think a really good example of that is Daniil Henry with the national team.
Yeah.
He's a glue guy, man.
Hit
And
the nail on the head.
he's going to World Cup. He needs to go. He's got to make sure that they stay together. And you need those guys who are going to be there that get the most out of other players, that know how to push the right buttons, know how to deal with multiple players. With everyone's got a different personality. Everyone has different buttons that you need to push. And people who understand the buttons to push for certain people are so important.
You hit the nail on the head, man. I couldn't agree more.
All right. And then moving on from CPL, this weekend, the inaugural League One Interprovincial Championships for the women. I think the idea long-term is to try and get the men in, but I think there needs to be a little bit of a reshuffle with League One Ontario, because they're still going in their league, whereas BC have finished already. And I think the PLSQ is done. I'm not 100% on that, but AS Blainville deserved champions from what I watched. They were very much the better team against Laval in the final, winning 3-0. And then they were the better team against Varsity, who's the BC representation. Varsity obviously missing two pretty key players in Holly Ward, who is at the World Cup, the U20s.
Okay.
And then Emma Regan, who's a center back. I think she went back to the University of Texas for preseason. So I love the initiative. I think it's really cool that you again, if we're starting this League One Canada, that there's something to play for at the end of the year, just for those League One teams. I think some more planning might need to go into it, obviously, because if you have university players coming back and playing, they've got preseason.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that happened with League One Ontario. A lot of us used to come back for the summer to play, but then we leave first week of August, and there's still August, September, October to play for the League One Ontario. So let's say Sigma, we'd be in first place, but then you got to bring all the U17s to play to fill in some spots, and then you just casually you don't keep up the run of form, right? So I mean, I think it's a good initiative, 100%, something to play for, something to look forward to. Congrats, Blainville, and congrats the third place winners as well. And
Alliance,
the PK shootout.
Alliance beat Varsity in a third place shootout. So, and they were actually unlucky they were unlucky not to qualify for the final. They lost in a shootout to Laval. So, no, it's awesome. I wonder if there's, I mean, it's tough to go and throw this off the cuff, but I wonder if there's some sort of like a domestic cup almost that League One Ontario could do, so that it's like, oh yeah, so in the middle of this, you throw in these games, this week is the round 1, round 2, all that stuff. You do a random draw, and then the winner of that. So that way it doesn't necessarily interrupt, because like you said, League One Ontario goes till the end of October. Like, you're not going to be able to finish that mid-July now. You can't condense it quite that much. So that would be an interesting thing, just because obviously you want them all to be there. You want that to be the biggest event that it possibly could be. And then again, put something on the line for it. Makes it that much more interesting. So no, it's definitely a successful first year of it though. Hopefully next year it grows, it gets that much bigger. And then we'll move on to Canada Summer Games. I don't know did you ever get to play in that? Did you ever get to compete in that? Or
Canada Summer Games, is that the same as like when you had the provincial teams and you played against each province? I'm not sure.
No, Canada Summer Games is like a U17, U18 thing.
Oh, then no, I never got to play in that.
I mean, I didn't either. My brother did though for BC one year, which was pretty cool. He actually played against I think in the Quebec team. I think it was Jeremy Gagnon-Lapare was in that team.
Okay,
so at the time, back then it was good, man. Like I got to watch a good amount of it. It was good. It was good to watch.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, because it doesn't necessarily need to be all the provincial team players, So Ontario basically had TFC U19s in there, so you can put in those different players, and again, if we're looking at results, Quebec comes out on top. They beat Ontario in the final. BC, who actually played Quebec in their group, lost in a shootout. So the way it worked is that you had to win your group to go to the semis. So BC
Okay.
ends up coming fifth.
Mhm.
They won their next two games, and New Brunswick came fourth. So it's pretty cool to see an
Wow,
Atlantic team
that's
do
pretty
that
cool.
well. Alberta came third, and they lost to Quebec in a shootout in the semis.
Mhm.
So you know what, man? Like the level of competition is getting better. And I know
Yeah,
like
I
a lot
mean,
of people are talking about, oh, TFC put their U19s in and they lost the final, but
mhm.
you've also got every single team that's now revved up to play you.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, a lot of people feel like Ontario, we have the whole, what would we say, overconfidence, cocky, our attitude. So people, whenever they play against Ontario, it's always like, yo, we want to kill these guys. We want to whip these guys. But I mean, I totally understand, especially if you're going to put the Toronto FC U19 squad as the Ontario representatives. Quebec, they're gonna gear up for this game. They're gonna be pumped to play these guys. Just to show everybody what's up, like put themselves on the map. So Quebec is, from my days in the provincial program, Quebec has always had good players. Like you said, Jeremy Gagnon Laparé. Also, what's his name? He used to play for Halifax, midfielder. Then he went to Malta. I forgot his name. Dang, center midfielder. I'll remember later.
I've
But
lost his name too
um,
now.
yeah, Louis Belongo. Yeah, yes, he played for Halifax and Valor. So there's a couple of guys I used to play for the Quebec side, and that were really solid. But if you really look at the placement and how the standings are, it kind of makes sense. You can kind of shift between Ontario, Quebec, Alberta. It's usually top three. That's usually how it goes. So I mean, BC usually I thought it would be better than Alberta, but it seems like something's in the water in Alberta. So
Yeah, Alberta's a bit of a hotbed. And I think like part of it's
yeah,
placement, right? Like if BC and
yeah,
Quebec are in the same group, well, only one's
same
going
group.
through.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's always
That
that
makes
side of it
sense.
as well. But I
Yeah.
think like I mean again, like from the TFC side of it, that's great.
Yeah.
The kids got to play a little bit more. I don't see an
Mhm.
issue with that. And then again, now they get to watch their players play against kids who want to beat them. Like, I think there's a certain sense of strength in being vulnerable enough to allow
Mhm.
your players to be put in that situation. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like,
Uh,
the only way to actually expand a player pool is to admit
mhm.
that you've made not just a mistake, but multiple mistakes
Multiple
along the way.
mistakes. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's right. Like these kids, like I've never understood the idea of, oh, we're gonna select kids at a young age, and then we'll stay really loyal to them throughout the whole way. And then if they're not good
Mhm.
enough at the end, like, why aren't you bringing in more kids? Bring in as many kids as you can, because some kids are just gonna succeed in your system at a certain age, but they might
Mhm.
not at a later age, or vice
Yeah.
versa. They
They
suit it
might
really well
fall off.
young,
Mhm.
but they might just not suit it when they're older. Like it's one of those things like advertisers can't sell to these kids because their
Mhm.
psychological makeup isn't their brain's not fully developed, but we
Yeah.
think it's fully
100%.
developed to be a professional athlete at 13,
Yeah.
14.
Yeah.
Like it's just it's one of those things that I think exposing them to these different situations and these different stresses of, no, you guys are the favorites.
Mhm.
It's not a bad thing to do. And maybe it's a wake-up call for some kids. Maybe it's a wake-up call for the kids they played against going, oh, I'm good
Mhm.
enough.
Yeah.
Oh, and then it
100%.
gives them something extra. It gives them extra motivation. Now maybe we'll see the benefits of that. So
Mhm.
I don't see there. I don't think there's a bad result in that, except for
Mhm.
someone internally loses their mind.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not, I don't think it's that big of a deal. You're totally right. That makes sense. But talking about these guys, you see 17s, 18s playing in the Canada Summer Games, we transitioned to college. 18-year-olds, freshman year, first time ever being in NCAA system. Preseason has just kicked off in NCAA for most teams. I would like to say captain's
Yeah,
practice, in
everyone I think's
quotations,
in it.
captain's practice.
Yeah,
Captain's practice.
yeah.
When I was a captain, I was never having no captain's practice, man. They showed up when I had to show up. I didn't believe in captain's practice, but that's just me. But yeah, NCAA preseason. This is the time you get to, if you're a freshman or you're a returning player, this is the time where you are most with your teammates.
This is the best three
Because
weeks
not,
of the year.
yeah,
It's
because
the best.
no one's on no one's on campus. You guys can
There's
do
no
whatever. Yeah,
classes.
no class. You don't have to wait in line for food. There's no nothing. Like everything is set. You get fresh boots. get the fresh gear, if you get fresh jerseys, you get
Yeah.
everything brand new. Like, and then you're the ones on campus. With other athletes that probably have preseason as well, but like you definitely get to start a new journey, whether like I said, you're a freshman or you're a returning player. It's just being better than you were the year before. So
yeah. And that's one of the things that I always kind of look at. And that's one of the things that's, again, I'm not going to go too back into conversations we've already had, but it's to talk about how reliant we are a little bit on the US system. Like if you look at our men's national team, look at how many college guys came out of that. But it wasn't necessarily being the reliant part of playing those games. It was everything you did in the remaining 9 months of the year.
Yep.
It's a lot about you individually. Like how much better are you going to get in order to then be better the next year? Because you have a fresh crop of 10 kids coming in. How many are in your position? How many of them want to take your spot? So that's one of the more interesting things that I always found, was that it was never comfortable, might be the wrong word, because by the end, when you're a junior or senior, you're like, yeah, I know where I sit.
Yeah.
I know where I sit. But you always had that of going, like for us, when I came in, SFU were back-to-back Final Four contenders. They're in the Final Four 2 years in a row. I came in, we were ranked number 1 in the country. The next year we fell off a bit. The next year we were number 2, number 1 my 4th year. So like we were always up at the top. So the guys coming in, they think they're contributing to that. And the competitive side is like, no. I'm going to prove that they're not. But they're like, no, they're pushing them to then go and contribute. So it's never really a state of comfort at college, because you always have to get that little bit better.
Yeah, you're definitely right. It's definitely, and it's also a reality check as well. I mean, I came in, me and Kyle Laren both went to University of Connecticut. We came in as highly touted freshmen. And we both started off our freshman year. So it was sort of a reality check, but it was also like, hey, your spot can get taken because you're just brand new. So I knew how good I was, but it was always about like, I got to prove that them giving me a scholarship was the right choice. So I always had, every day it's like, hey, I got to make sure I'm on my P's and Q's, cross my T's, dot my I's. Like I got to make sure, like I had the type of confidence about me. My coach used to think I was cocky. Coach Ray Reed, I love him to death. Me and him used to bump heads all the time, but he thought I was cocky. I'm like, no, I just know who I am as an individual. And like you said, and as you get older, like the college season is only 3 months if your team's really good. As you get older, you learn so much more about yourself on the field and off the field, and how you are with your teammates, how you view football, what you want to do with football. So every year, personally, I wanted to get better. Did it translate to the team getting better? No, not all the time. Because my freshman year, we had one of the most stacked teams in the country, and we went to the Elite Eight and we lost. That was the 3rd consecutive year going to the Elite Eight. The next year, we lost Andre Blake, who went number 1 in the 2014 draft.
He's a good goalkeeper, man.
Come on. and then we lost Andre Blake. We lost Mamadou Diouf, who was like All-American for 3 years straight. And then we brought back some of the same players, but we didn't end up making the tournament the next year. And our coach was losing his mind. 3rd year, we lose Kyle Laren, number 1 in the draft. And then we have a whole half of team Hall gone. So we're bringing young guys. I'm like one of the oldest guys on the team. I'm still young. I'm like 19, turning 20 at that point after my sophomore year. So it's just like, it can be either a really big change. And most of the teams that do well in NCAA are usually teams that are senior loaded, like age loaded. Like if you're older, like you said, how we talk about maturity. So, but if I could tell you one funny story, I guess not funny, but it is funny and it's sad at the same time because it has to do with fitness. We had to do, in the off season, we had to do a ROTC training camp. So we had to wake up at 7 a.m. We had to run and work out with the military guys on campus from 7 a.m. to 12 to noon. We're out here carrying logs, whole trees, squatting them. Yeah. Piggybacking each other up 2 massive like farm hills Like, we're doing the craziest things. We had to finish like 1,500 push-ups, 500 sit-ups, and 50 rope climbs between 8 people. We had to finish all that together. It
Oh my
was
God.
insane. Like, and my
That's
coach thought that was gonna
ridiculous.
he thought that was gonna get us better at soccer. Nah,
I
nah,
didn't
that
hear anything about a ball being included in
nah,
any of that.
nothing
Yeah,
at all.
I got kind of lucky, man, with preseason for us. Like I did. I had Kevin Harms who came in. Harmsy played at the national team. He played with LA Galaxy with Bex and stuff. He's awesome. And so the first year it was like, no, guys, we're doing 2-a-days. We're gonna stagger it, all this stuff. And it was good. And it was never to absolutely murder you. It was to test you.
Yeah.
I was really, really lucky with that. Where again, like day one, beep test. Day one beep
Okay.
test. If you don't hit the score, everybody knows it. And it's not necessarily that, okay, here's your punishment for it. It's you didn't hit it. And we now know that you haven't done what you needed to do in the off season. It was almost like, so it's almost like that thing where like you talk about, you gotta, oh, I'm on a scholarship. It's by getting signed to a university, whether it's a scholarship or not, you've earned the opportunity. Getting your starting spot is earning the coach's trust. So if you're now walking in day one and you're not meeting the fitness test, you're not doing these things, like don't get me wrong, some people, like for me, I'm horrible. I was horrible at fitness tests. I was horrible. I should be like, what's the minimum I need to get? Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm just going for that because like for me, I always played the game. It was never really my athleticism. I played it with my mind. I found space. I was technical. That's what I did. I was never someone who's going to cover every single blade of grass. So I played it. I tried to use my brain as much as I could, but I knew how fit I needed to be. So I'd get that fit. I'd play all summer. I used to play PDL. I was with the Sounders organization, all that stuff, and it was awesome. But it was like, no, okay, fitness test. If you missed it, holy. And then you have everyone who, if you look at the seniors, oh, none of them are dropping out. Well, okay, well, I'm not dropping out just because I hit the bare minimum. And so you keep going, and everybody's daggered. If someone's not daggered at the end, everyone also sees that. And so then you have those senior players coming up to you and going, "What are you doing?" And so it's this really cool. It's this really, really cool experience. I really loved it, and I was lucky enough. But like even still, like we did one where we had a fitness session, and we're like, we're playing tonight. We have we have one of our 3 preseason games tonight. Why are we doing a 2-a-day? And they're like, no, we're doing a 2-a-day. You guys are going to play X amount of minutes too. And like better rehab, better doing all your right stuff. And it was almost that test of trust. Like, are you now going to do what you need to? We play in 6 hours.
Yeah.
You got to recover because you got to start. You not only start, kickoffs in 6 hours, you have to warm up again. So it's all of a sudden like that whole thing, like, okay, here we go. And I think like that's one of the things that is most important, is making sure that everyone understands like some of the fitness tests are ridiculous, like you said, and
100%.
even some of the other ones that you have where it's like, oh, you need to run this ridiculous amount, or else you're going to run every day until you do it. And you're like, well, now you're just potentially stopping your team from getting chemistry. But for the most part, it's like most of them are a test to make sure that you've done what you need to do in the off season.
Yeah, and lucky enough, in the summertime, I got to play League One Ontario, so I was already game fit coming into preseason. So I'll come earlier. A lot of the guys will come earlier, and we would do the yo-yo test before the new guys came in. So we already had our scores. So we would come in and just be a motivating factor. So when the new guys came in, they did their score, and they seen some of the older guys watching. It's like, damn, I can't drop out because like that's my first impression. And
exactly.
And they don't understand when they first get in that you're playing with someone else's time. Like we don't have that much time. We have 1 more season, 2 more seasons left. You have 4.
And so you think you have all the time in the world when you get there. All the time in the world,
and it goes like that, and it goes like that. So the quicker the younger kids are able to understand that, the easier transition on the field is. And I think as you get older, I think because everyone's around the same age, it's tough for people to like lead each other because like, yo, this guy's only a year older than me. Like, why is he telling me what to do? And like when you get to the professional game, you because you've been through a lot, you allow people to who have more, because when we're younger, we think we're know-it-alls. So but when you get to professional game, you allow people that have more experience to teach you, to guide you. When you're younger, you're like, hey, I was a Gatorade player of the year. Like, no one cares about that stuff. That shit goes out the door.
So are the other 10 players who started. Like, you're like,
Yeah,
everyone's
exactly.
done exactly what you did, because you guys are at the same
Exactly.
level. You guys are all at the same
Yeah.
level right now. No, yeah, that's, and actually, like, that's one of the things that I realized too with some kids, where they're like, they came in year one as a know-it-all, and then they went through it, and then next year they're like, yeah, okay, I get that.
Yeah.
And
So, and as funny as it is, you're in Vancouver. Jake Nowinski was my roommate and co-captain for University of Connecticut, now playing at the Whitecaps. So whenever I'm there, I always holler at him. Shout out to him. He just had a brand new baby girl, Lane. And I'm
congratulations,
happy
Jake.
for him. Congratulations. Teammate stories, he was the fittest mofo on the planet. I call him Captain America.
Yeah,
That guy,
he looks it,
yo,
man.
his will, his competitive nature is crazy. I used to be like, man, you got this, because I cannot do what you like. This, and I think we balance each other out well as captains, because there's certain things that like I could go talk to the team about, and there's certain things that like he was more the stern one. I was more the one that was like, I wasn't lenient, but I was also the one like more understand. He was like, Jay,
Yeah.
it's this way, because he had to grind to get to where he is. He never got a scholarship until like his junior year. He had to like, and I always make the story. If I didn't fall asleep one time before a pregame meeting, and I got there with like 5 minutes left before the meeting, and the coach was like, "This is my second game ever as a freshman," and the coach was like, "You know what? You're not starting." And he started Jake, and then Jake balled out, and then ever since then, Jake's been in the rotation. He was going to redshirt his first year.
Wow.
So yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
crazy.
Now look at him. He's like, he always every year, like when he signed his extension with Vancouver, he was like, "Yo, Kwame, thank you again." He's like, he always gives me a shout out. I'm like, yeah, love. Yeah, man.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
man. So
hilarious.
it's pretty cool, man. I'm happy for him. I'm sad I didn't get to see him this past weekend, but
Yeah, it's too
definitely
bad.
gonna link up. Yeah, yeah.
That's too bad. And then last thing on the docket, state of the CSA. Obviously, there's been a ton of stuff with player protests last a couple months ago, ongoing contract talks, demands being made by both the men and the women, recognizing different, I guess, associations within them, recognizing lawyers. It's a bit of a shit show, if we're being honest. Rick Westhead wrote a couple articles on TSN that kind of shed light on behind the scenes stuff. CSB deal, which again, we'll get into that. We get into it a little bit more in the interview that we've got coming up. But even with regards to that, I think that's become more of a topic, and it hasn't become as much of a distraction lately based on the CSA's dealings and how they've handled it. I don't disagree with them going into that, because again, no one was willing to invest in the CPL. So you're going to have to try and figure that out and get into bed with certain people to be able to push it through. But the deal itself makes no sense. 20-year deal.
Honestly, I feel like sometimes we reach a stalemate where it's like, okay, what is morally right, and then what do we need to do for the betterment of the country, like the state of football in the country. So, I mean, when it comes to paying the players, the World Cup bonuses, all that stuff, I definitely think like we should be able as a country, a first world country that has a lot of resources, that doesn't really get national, like global recognition for any sports other than hockey. And that's because we're half ice. Yeah. Like half the country's ice. So, I mean, I think we should be able to give these guys what they deserve or what they're asking for, just because of the amount of eyes it has set on the country as a whole when it comes to the soccer aspect, and how much work they've put in behind the scenes, and how difficult the road was, and just like the opportunity of being able to be part of back-to-back World Cups guaranteed, right? So it's not like the country or the CSA are going to lose money because 2026, it's going to be ramped up even more, right? So, I mean, looking at it in hindsight, I hope they can figure out a better situation for both parties. I know they have a good couple friendlies coming up in September against Uruguay. They're talking about it, I guess. Yeah, but hopefully all of that can get sorted out, because when going into a World Cup or going into any job, like, we have to remember that these guys, this is still their livelihood. This is how they pay their bills, how they feed their families, and this is what they have been working for their whole lives. And not a lot of people have gotten the opportunity. So we don't really want to shortchange people that have put in the amount of work that they've put in, from the coaching staff, from the technical directors, from everyone, like the management, down to the kit man, down to the video man. Like, we don't want to shortchange them. So I think just people swallowing their pride and just doing what maybe you don't think needs to be done, but does need to be done in hindsight for a brighter future. So then people have something to look forward to. So that's how I look at it.
For sure. And it's one of those things too, because I mean, I'm more inclined to side with the players and go pay them what they deserve. But then when we talk about infrastructure issues within Canada soccer, and we talk about the U20s not being able to train as much, it hits me that way too, where I'm like, God, they kind of need to take a big, like, to fuel the entire system, they do need to take a bigger cut, just because of how far back we are. And that's the only thing I look at where it's like, almost like, okay, are the players able to swallow a bit of pride as well? Where
both sides,
because I think inevitably the only way this is going to work is both sides are unhappy with the result, but they're content. That's the only way it's really going to work.
They're going to have to find a middle ground.
They have to. And it sucks because, again, and part of this though is, the players being upset about the CSB deal. Well, there's nothing you guys can do about it. It's a signed contract. Like, you have to move on from it. The fact you guys say, well, we didn't know about it in the first place, is kind of on you guys for not paying attention. Like, some of them weren't there. Some of them are there. Yeah. Like, you can't just be like, well, we weren't made aware of it. Well, that's not really their fault. You didn't make yourself aware of it. Like, there's not the players are to blame at all, but you can't look at a signed contract and now do it. Like, you look at the US women, they just did that. Their case got thrown into court.
Yeah.
In a very democratic state of California. The judge went, no, this has no merit. And they threw it out of court. So it's a signed contract. You got to deal with it. It'll be interesting to see the way that things go forward with the new one, especially with both parties, with the men and the women. I don't know what's going to happen, to be honest with you.
I'm definitely going to try to stay in the loop. I'll ask questions. I got a couple people, different places. So we'll see how that goes 100%. But honestly, I think we just have to have proper communication. Like sit down at the table. We're human and first of all, you have to remember we're human. We're not just like any puppets or anything like that. Second of all, we have to be on the same page of where we want the game to go in Canada and what are the most efficient and best ways to get it there without it being detrimental to the whole system, right? Because at the end of the day, money does fuel the engine which is the infrastructure, which is getting the U17s camps, U20s camps, U23s out. So like all that stuff that we wanted when we were their age, are we just gonna throw that out the window? And that's where it goes. Like, people are gonna have to bite the bullet. We're gonna have to find the middle ground, because at the same time, you want this opportunity that you have to be continuous opportunities for everyone else. Like we always say, like, we're getting this opportunity, but we're not gonna get the peak of it. Like, it's unfortunate. Yeah, we're paving the road now for other people, so it's easier for the younger kids. But we can't start high. We gotta.
Yeah, if you start at 11,
let it keep building.
If you start at 11, you got nowhere to go. So exactly. I think that's the side of it that I look at the CSA and I go, I can understand their issue with that kind of stuff that's gone on. But again, God, the players did it. They want what's and COVID definitely played a role, because again, they weren't supposed to be there. So I'm sure that was part of it. But I'm just hoping for a pretty swift resolution with all this stuff, because it's like, again, now did we have to add this distraction? Like that's everything was going so well and so good and everyone was behind them. And then it's just like, it was almost like, I don't know how you felt about it, but as like a fan growing up, you were waiting for the penny to drop. You're like,
Mhm.
I don't know when it's going to be, but everything's going a little too smoothly right now. But
Yeah,
I thought it was going to be an injury. I didn't think it was going to be this.
yeah,
This has
yeah,
potential to be even more detrimental than an injury. So I
yeah.
just want it to be resolved, get it over with,
Mhm.
and let's figure out the proper way to move on. Because what you said, like communication is key, but transparency is also key. Like
Mhm.
we understand that we're taking less of a cut so that this happens. So
Mhm.
this needs to happen.
Yeah, 100%. But now that we're talking about the CSA and Canada soccer, we're gonna introduce our first ever interviewee. Is there interview? Whatever.
Guest? I don't know.
First ever guest that we're interviewing. He goes by KJ. Most people know him as Christian Jack. Worked at TSN. Worked at Sportsnet. English native, British native. Just glad to have him on. Happy that he took time out of his day to have a real in-depth conversation about his background, about journalism, about what motivates him, and his whole experience in Canada and in the UK, and his experience as a whole in football in general. Well-spoken guy, really like him. He's one of my favorite people in the media, within media, wherever, any type of sport. And he's very transparent. He asks the right questions, and he just wants to see everyone and everything about Canada soccer go well and in the right direction. So yeah, shout out to KJ for the interview, and hopefully you guys enjoy it.
Yeah. He was awesome to talk to, and someone who, again, if anyone's interested in the industry, he's someone who I think's extremely approachable and willing to pass on any knowledge and even opportunity. And I think that's one of the cooler things about him is that he was someone who got an opportunity when he was younger and looks at that as a means to then help the next generation. So yeah, hope everyone enjoys the conversation. And without further ado, we'll pass it off onto that.
All right. Ready?
Do it.
Perfect. Our first ever guest is a veteran sports reporter who hails from Birmingham, England. After immigrating to Canada in his early 20s, he has very much earned the reputation as being one of the most trusted voices in the Canadian football landscape, covering the sport for more than 20 years, reporting and broadcasting for companies including The Score, TSN, and now One Soccer. He is currently the Vice President of Media and Content of the Canadian Premier League. Welcome to the show, Christian Jack. How are you doing?
I am great, fellas. How are you guys?
Doing well. I'm doing well in St. Louis, enjoying my time.
Yeah, same here, just chilling in Vancouver. I mean, KJ, before we even get to some of the other questions we prepared, I mean, how are you feeling about Steven Gerrard at the head of Villa right now?
Get right to it, right to my club. I'm feeling good about it, Adam. I mean, to be fair, he's a great recruiter, and I think the club has gone to another level in terms of, the size. It certainly doesn't need to go to the level in the eyes of Villa fans. We'll tell you that we're one of the big six clubs in England and one of the best big clubs in the world. And I think we are up there as being a massive club. But, like Gerrard's bringing in players like Coutinho and that certainly helps, right? When we're getting him and Kamara and people coming in. So, look, we're spending a lot of money. And I think now it's time for Gerrard, the coach, to try and show that he can defend games and take the team to another level. But it's good. It's not that long ago we were trying to win penalty shootouts to get back into the Premier League. So it's certainly nice to be back where we belong.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to just as a neutral, at least regarding Villa, to see that, because I remember with Martin O'Neill when they're challenging for the top 4 and top 5 for pretty consistently. And then obviously, I'm a Man United fan, so looking at that change of manager who's been there for a while and understands the club and the culture, some rough years ahead when that happens. So hopefully Stevie can kind of sit in there and kind of calm the storm a little bit and they can start getting back up.
Yeah, we're not going to have many people feeling sorry for Man United fans, though. Just letting you know.
You know what? I had a great first 15 years of nothing but success, and so it's a bit of karma.
Precisely.
Which is fair enough. Everyone goes through it. So
100%. So KJ, obviously me and you, we go way back. You and I go way back. And obviously in the CPL, we've had our run-ins, we had conversations, our interviews, etc. It's always a great time speaking to you. But now we want to dive in to KJ, the man, the family man, the guy that's always in Canadian soccer, always, but no one really knows much about him. Always speaking about Canadian soccer, always knows the ins and outs, but we don't know you personally. So I want to first question I want to ask is like, what brought you to want to become a sports journalist?
Yeah, Kwame, as you said, great to get to know you over the last few years. It's been a pleasure, my friend, and thanks for having me on. I mean, I've always been obsessed with sports ever since I was a little boy, really. Sporting family, not just football, but many things. We're a big racing family, IndyCar, car racing, bikes, and cricket and rugby, you name it. We loved everything. So I always wanted to be in sports very early, and unfortunately wasn't blessed with the athletical genes of Mr. Awua, so I knew I wasn't going to be a footballer. I think I pretty much knew that very early, and then we had a football tournament in high school where you had to pick players at different levels, and I decided to be a coach, and you could actually pick different levels of player, and we all knew what levels they were, and I put this team together, and my team won, and they called it the team that Jack built, because that was my last name, and they called me Jack. And so we won the championship, and I was like, I like this football sport. I like this tactic stuff. And then I started to get into a little bit more of that. And then before I knew it, as a junior reporter, I was covering, football in England is everywhere, right? I lived in the northwest of England in Preston. So, half an hour away, we're in Manchester, Liverpool, you got Blackburn and Bolton and all, Premier League clubs all over. So, I covered Preston North End at a very young age, and then do my journalism degree in university and graduated from there. And then I was in newspapers and worked in news for about 15 months, which I really did not like at all. When you get to know me a little bit more, you'll know that I'm not a news person. I don't watch the news. It's pretty miserable. And I've got a very kid-like brain when it comes to seeing things like that. I can't really handle trauma or too much sadness and death because it's difficult to kind of watch it. So I went into sports because it was a lot more innocent and a lot more fun. So I finally got into sports and covered newspapers for close to 3 years before I moved to Canada. So that's kind of like the young me that kind of fell in love with sports. And I always loved writing in English. So I always wanted to kind of combine the two together. And football journalism was certainly something that fascinated me from a young age.
So why Canada? Obviously, I think I read something that your family used to travel quite a bit, so you used to come to North America a significant amount. But was it just you preferred the culture up here, or what exactly did you find so interesting about coming?
I was always fascinated by North America. I had posters of footballers on my wall, but I also had posters of basketball players and baseball players on my wall. I had like Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan and Ken Griffey Jr. and Chipper Jones and these guys. Like I loved North American sports, and I used to record games that used to happen during the night and then watch them the next day at home and come home and watch sports like that. So anytime of North American time I had over here, I was fascinated with it. I was 17 and I got an internship at CNN in Atlanta, CNN International Sports. And so I worked there for a little bit through a connection that I had, and loved Atlanta and loved it there. And then, my parents kind of started thinking about moving to North America as well through their travels. And the United States was always pretty special to us, but the US felt very different to the UK. It was an unbelievable culture change for us. It was a great country to visit. But Canada almost felt like that little bit of like in some regards, the perfect 51st state, that it wasn't quite the US, and it also felt quite British. So that was kind of like the perfect kind of place to us. We came here in 97, we had friends here, and we kind of thought this was a pretty special place to live. And my brother came first, then I came later, and did it all, officially immigrated it all, gave up everything and started again. So I guess, it was God's plan for us to be that way. And it was some sacrifices and not working, full time for many years and trying to get back into the industry. But no looking back now, fellas. Love it here.
Fantastic. I mean, hey, stayed part of the Commonwealth, so you still got that. And I guess, and it's so funny, I didn't know you worked for CNN in Atlanta. So I guess that probably speaks to why you're a Braves fan.
Yeah, it does speak to why I'm a huge Atlanta Braves fan. Yeah, probably the last time I cried actually when Freddie Freeman caught the ball in the first base and we won the World Series in 2021. I never thought I'd see that. And my son's a big Braves fan now, of course. But he's a big baseball fan. He plays, and he was only 11. And that game we played the Astros and we were dominating the game. We were winning by 6-7 runs, and I still didn't think we were going to win until the very end. And he's like, "Dad, like, why are you not celebrating? We've got this. We've won this." I'm like, "Nope, it's not over till the last out." And you go through all the pain and the torment, and Game 7 the year before against the Dodgers. So yeah, just a huge Braves fan, and it's been a difficult year for us, but thankfully as we tape this, we're on a good run right now. So yeah, I love baseball, fellas. I just love to switch my brain up sometimes and just turn on baseball, and because a lot of sports are so connected to football, soccer, that it doesn't matter whether you're even watching rugby or basketball. To be quite frank, you're always thinking the space, the movement, things like that. Baseball is a bit like racing for me, where it's so disconnected from soccer that I can just switch off and just enjoy it. It's very different.
For sure. Oh, sorry, go Kwame.
No, yeah. I mean, I never would have thought that, honestly. I have been able to go to a couple of baseball. I got to watch the Cardinals versus the Blue Jays here, so I enjoyed that. And I had the opportunity to actually speak to one of the guys that work for the Cardinals. And I tried to compare baseball and soccer. Like, how would we compare a training camp in soccer, a preseason camp, or a preseason camp in baseball? And it is totally different. So I can understand why you can totally just switch off and just watch something else and get your mind off soccer for a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit like cricket for me as well. Like cricket is a sport in the UK. It's different speeds of cricket now, right? You can have the long format and the short format, but it's there's a bit of beauty there and just chilling and watching for hours on end. I love it.
Yeah, I can't sit down and watch on the TV too much. I love going to the games live. Blue Jays and Mariners is one of the coolest sporting events, because 90% of the stadium are Blue Jays fans, and the Mariners they get booed in their own stadium, which is hilarious. But golf's probably the one for me. Golf is the one that I'll tune in and switch off and can watch a full 8-hour round.
So KJ, to change the topic, I know soccer players and professional athletes, or everyone in their careers, have different day-to-day things they do before to help them prepare for what they need to do. So for me, I wake up in the morning, have a nice breakfast. I'll do my pre-ab. I'll do my stretching, and obviously the warm-up before getting to the field to actually do the team warm-up. Like, can you take us through a day-to-day grind for KJ? Like, when you're getting ready for Christian Jack to get ready for, let's say, for tonight's game, like you were telling us you were working all day. So how does that day look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. You know, every day is a little different for me. I mean, when I was at TSN and the Score for years, it was just game by game, take one game at a time kind of thing, the old athlete speak. But, you know, you broadcast, and I was doing Champions League, Europa League games, MLS, Premier League, you know, it was like on and on and on. So where I'm sitting to you right now, talking to you in my office, I spend hours upon hours just, you know, preparing for these games and, you know, watching film of players, watching games, taking notes. I'm a very diligent note taker still. Pen and paper is still king for me rather than computer. Just the ability to access things. And I find like when I write things down, I certainly have more of an immediate recall. I certainly remember things that I write down a little bit more than just typing. So, you know, to answer your question, like tonight, for example, when we're taping this game, I'm sure when people are listening, it's over, but, you know, we have another Canadian men's national team game, right? So usually I'm reaching out to some players or watching some media availability of that, you know, the team that they're playing, Honduras, you do some research on them, watch a few of their games, or certainly some clips, keep an eye on what's going on there, read some of the local press. At the end of the day, you know, to simplify it, really, my role as I sit in the broadcast tonight to do the game is to educate, it really, you know, inform and entertain those people who are working for a living all day and just come home and, much like me for my baseball games, I suppose, put the TV on and just say, I haven't had time to fill out my brain about what's happening tonight. I want you to tell me what's going on, right? So that's me, is to bring that kind of news, the element, what the coaches are saying, what the players are saying, what the meaning of the game is around it, what the consequences are, all of that stuff. Is at the end of the day, there's so much information on in the world, guys, as you know, not everyone can consume it. And there are people within soccer in this very country that don't know a game like this is happening. So how do you educate them and, you know, and get them to be informed on that? So, you know, never lose sight of that. And that's basically what I'm doing while still working over here and obviously with the Canadian Premier League as well, and doing stuff on a day-to-day basis with them. And I was at Forge yesterday watching them, you know, destroy another win. Oh yeah,
that was an impressive
win.
Good
again. Yeah. So Kwame's team is playing well again.
So even kind of looking at that, like you talked about having to find all this information, do you find that you go through a specific process for how you disseminate what information kind of needs to go out and which ones you think, I don't need to include that? Or do you just kind of look at what does the person watching need to know the most?
It's a good question. I'm meticulous by nature, an over planner. So I've only ever had a few shows I've gone into where I've had that feeling in my gut that I'm not ready, and I hated it. And that was really because there was too many things going on that week, like literally a Champions League game Tuesday, Champions League game Wednesday, and then Europa League. And it's like, oh, how am I supposed to prepare? I couldn't get a chance to watch the press conference and things like that. So I always feel like that I go into a broadcast over prepared rather than under prepared. So for example, we've had many things where we've been doing an MLS game in Montreal and suddenly the lines are not painted properly and there's a 30-minute delay, or you've got a lightning delay, or you've got a problem with the pitch or delay. And, the producer would always say, guys, we need you to fill. And I'd be like, fine, I can talk all night. Like I can talk all night because I'm ready. So that's the best feeling you can have, is that you need to talk more about Curacao the other night. We did it. Need to talk more about Honduras. We can do it. You just prepare and prepare and prepare. That's the way that I approach it. Others do it very differently, but that's the way I've always done it, to be honest. And sometimes, to answer your question again, sometimes the day will tell you, right? So if there's a certain story that's a hot topic, you follow the news, right? You follow the noise or the headlines. What do you really need to know about? What is the burning topic right now in that show? Like, for example, on Friday, obviously, when we did the Curacao game, the topic was the cancellation of the previous game and the stories around that and what we're hearing right now. And there's John Herman had spoke the day before, and follow that news story. So sometimes the news will tell you really to put where to put your focus, Adam, and other days you just go out there and figure it out.
No, I mean, that seems like the best option always, right? If you over prepare and then you do need that. It's funny because I remember that game in Montreal where the lines weren't painted properly.
Oh yeah.
I remember that being, and the only thing I was thinking, I was like, yeah, okay, they're filling time, but how the hell did they paint the lines that poorly?
That doesn't make any. If I was a player that day, I would have been very upset.
Yeah.
Because just like how he prepares, like we prepare based on the time. So we have like certain time we're gonna do this. If you gotta meditate, you gotta do fit, you know what I mean? The extra stuff that you gotta do to prepare for a game. And then when you go, any delay kind of puts everyone off. Like the delay that we had when we played in El Salvador, CONCACAF League Forward, and the lights turned off. It's like you have to deal with it, but at the same time, you're sitting in the locker room like, wow, like what's going on right now? So I can understand 100%. Yeah. But that's cool that you guys actually are over prepared and get everything going. And keep people intrigued. I think that's the most important thing as well.
And then obviously, KJ, you've had kind of worn a lot of different hats, right? Sometimes you're pitch side, sometimes you're in the studio interviewing tons of people, whether even now on the digital side of it, with some of the stuff you're doing for Canada Soccer. Do you have some of what are your most memorable interviews? Maybe one that was for a really good reason, funny reason, or just someone was so disinterested?
I've had them all, I think. I've had lots of different ones. I think I'm always fascinated by winners, right? I'm fascinated by winners and the mentality of winning. I remember talking to Kwame about that and how you learn from losing and then coming back to win. And, I like to read quite a lot and figure out. I always go into my interviews to try and make sure, how can I make them different? Particularly when you have somebody that has done literally thousands and thousands of them, like Zlatan Ibrahimovic, for example, Wayne Rooney. How do you make them different, right? Like, so Zlatan, I did this thing where I did a thing with him called the quiz, and we did a quiz on TSN. So I quizzed Zlatan about his career and things like that, and he loved that. But my favorite interview is reason behind my Twitter photo is Bastian Schweinsteiger. Because he was one of my favorite players and he was so kind. I've interviewed him a few times, but the first time I did it, he was so kind and respectful. And I got him thinking about things that I'd never heard him say before, even to the German media about, because I'd done so much reading and talking about how, 2010, when they got played off the park by Spain in the World Cup and lost 1-0, and how the German Federation said, we need to learn how to play like them to win a World Cup. And, and eventually 4 years later, they were World Cup champions, right? And, Champions League final when he plays Chelsea in Munich and he's, it goes to penalty shootouts in his own stadium and he's shaking on the spot in a penalty kick to take it and he misses, and then how they lose from that and they go on to win, at Wembley the year later against Dortmund, right? Like just how he learns to lose to come back to win. And so much of that unbelievable winning mentality that comes through Bayern Munich and the ability to just know how to get things done and figure it out. So for me, it was a fascinating discussion, one that I love to listen to and listen back. And the best interviews are much like this, I think, is when you get the person that you're talking to just feel like they're in conversation and they even forget they're wearing a microphone or in front of the camera, and they're just relaxing and talking amongst a friend. I think they're the best kind of interviews you can get. Kwame, I would imagine you'd know that more than anybody.
100%. I mean, I think that's the most important thing. A lot of athletes, we just want to feel comfortable. And if we have a good rapport, like you and I can always come to you, even if it's off the mic, off the camera. I can always come to you. We can always have a conversation about football. Like it's never always, doesn't always have to be a business transaction. So I think that's important, just having a personal relationship with someone that understands the mind of an athlete. So it's that definitely sounds like a memorable interview. I wish I got to play against Schweinsteiger or Ibra.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, you'll be playing. You'll get to play against some of the future legends, I'm sure.
100.
Definitely, it's nice of Duffy to give you the green light to use the quiz. That was nice of him.
No, it wasn't quite Duffy's quiz. It was a different one. Yeah, you're right.
So bouncing off of that, like, what would you say are the highest moments in your career as a sports journalist, or even let's say soccer journalist, football journalist?
Yeah, I think it's when you come together as a team and you work together on major events. There's really nothing like working on a World Cup or a Euros. Like it can be exhausting, and it's actually, you go into it and you'd have, you can do all the preparation in the world. And I've got the notebook here on my notebook, a 300-page notebook filled out for the 2018 World Cup, and you prepare everything, all 32 countries, and you go into it. But really nothing can prepare you for the fact that you're doing every game for 33 days in a row with the same people, and you're doing 200 hours of live television, and suddenly you've done a triple header, and then the next day you're coming back in at 4 a.m. for a quadruple header. And it's like, and then 3 more days, another game, 3 more days, and another game, 3 more games, another game, 3 more, and then suddenly you get to like match day 6 in the World Cup, and it feels like you've been at it for like 3 months. And you're like, what happened in that first game again? That was only 5 days ago. And it's like the recall you've really got to come up with, and the note taking, and something like, how do you remember that? And it's like, you've really got to rely on so many people. And so that's the special part, right? Is when you work with the same people, and particularly, obviously, behind the scenes, everyone's so important, but particularly if you can get along with the people you're on air with, the rapport, you can't fake it, guys. No matter what you're watching, it doesn't matter whether you love NBA on TNT or Major League Baseball on Fox, no matter what you watch, if you watch closely enough, you'll know whether they get along or whether there's a bit of edginess and they don't get along. You can't fake it. It's life. So, and the ones that have rapport on TV are the ones that have it away from it. They'll do anything with you for it. You know what I mean? You can see that those people have got each other's back on TV, just like in life. It's like sports. You're playing with your friends in the back line, you know that you've got their back. If you're not really sure about them, then it's a little different. So those relationships are really special that you build with these people, and then you go through it forever. You do that with them, and you've got that together forever. Those reference points.
So when you're working on something that large, like you say, a World Cup where you've got four games in a day, I think a couple of them, they might be split into like half an hour segments, so they might start a little bit. How many people are actually watching the games? Because it'd be ridiculous for you guys, just the 3 of you on the panel, to be sitting there trying to jump between all these games, right? Like how many people are kind of watching and then maybe feeding information to you to take notes and all that?
Nobody else, just us. So
wow.
Yeah. So I mean,
you're scaring me here, KJ.
No. Everyone's different a little bit, but like we would be the ones. So for example, one soccer right now where we're doing is a little different, but for a World Cup, there's only one game going on at the same time, right? Mainly. When it gets to the third round of group games and there's double games at the same time, we split it up. So myself and Stevie, or myself and whoever else my analyst would be, we'd watch one game and the other person would watch the other. And then you would you would designate it to an editor that you can speak to through your earpiece, clip this, and you would work with the producer about what your halftime topics would be. So you would know relatively that you've got 4 minutes at halftime, or you might have a 4-minute segment and a follow-up with 2 minutes later. So it's like you're basically looking at 3 or 4 things, topics, goals that you need to talk about. But you have to go into the half knowing no matter what plays out in that half, you got to find them. So like, I could have a 3-3 first half and it speaks for itself. Or, you know what, I've had challenges in the past where I've had like a Burnley Southampton Premier League game at 7:30 in the morning, and it's dull and it's 0-0 and I've got to find 5 minutes. But you always do it. You find something to talk about, right? So that we basically the ones, to answer your question, that find the plays. It's the same at One Soccer. And then the other guys behind the scenes do a great job. You know, they're clipping them up. You're working with the producer. You're working with the tape operators to find the plays that you need. You can find your ins and your outs. Sometimes you can work on, if you get time, key pauses, break it down, show this, different plays like that. But we're the quarterback of those plays, no doubt.
Wow, that's incredible. That is a ton of work. And again, it's almost like the recall of being able to say, okay, clip this, clip this, clip this. And then you get to halftime, you're like, oh, I said 4 things. What was number 1 again? Like that little feedback loop. Like,
yeah, the producer usually works with you on that, because they're the ones who ultimately have to time it out. Like, they'll tell you if you've clipped too much, and then you got to go back and things. And then something can break. Like, you could get a goal in the 45th minute, and suddenly you got to bring that in, remove something else. You know, you can't talk. Let's save that for post game if we get time. Things like that. So it's live TV. It's flexible. Games, football happens all the time. Things are happening differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
sure. Actually cool. Wow.
And now kind of switching gears here a little bit to the Canadian side of it. In your opinion, like what do we need to do to just progress the sport in general? Like, are there specific things, like the obstacles that you can see from, you know, the CSA's point of view, from players, from a grassroots level? Like, what are some of the things that you've seen, how we have progressed since you've kind of got here, and then the steps that we still need to take?
Well, I think it's genuinely trending in the right direction. You know, I think the Canadian Premier League is an enormous step forward for it, you know, and hopefully we're going to get the equivalent with the women's game as well. And what League One Ontario and what League One national wise is doing is great, right? I think in terms of what they're offering, you know, pathways now for players is very important that didn't exist before. And so, you know, we've got to give these players opportunities to play, because too many would fall in what I will call as the pit. There's too many teenagers that would come through and fall in a pit, because if like an academy director and an MLS club, and by the way, who is he or she to dictate a future, didn't pick up on the player, if this player didn't like them or didn't like the way they acted or they looked or they played, then if their face didn't fit, they were done. And now there are lots of opportunities for these players to go somewhere else within our borders, not just in the US, to play and get opportunities to play. That is really important for teenagers, particularly, to give them chances to know that they can go out and get opportunities to play. And with the expansion coming in the CPL across the country, we can only hope that that continues. So I think on the pitch, that is certainly helpful. Off the pitch, this is probably a lot harder. I think, you know, I still think there's still a lot more attention for a lot of people to pay attention to other sports. And, you know, qualifying for the World Cup isn't the peak. People think this is the peak. This is just the beginning. This is base camp, in my opinion. This is base camp now. It's now, what are we doing for 2026? How do we get people to pay attention to every single game? How do we get people to go out there and do it and focus on CPL, MLS, Canada games? What do they mean? And get those young fans who were casual fans before to be concrete fans going forward. And it's a difficult plan, but hopefully we can start working towards it.
Yeah, I mean, being a player myself and having come through the academy system with Sigma, and I've been on trial with Toronto FC Academy, and having to start your soccer playing career as a young kid, I started playing futsal. That's what started my whole soccer career. So I started playing in the Spanish league, and then I ended up going to different clubs within Ontario, the provincial team and stuff like that. So that was my first exposure to, oh, maybe I can actually play for the Canadian national team, but it was always looked down upon. So now to see where we are now, I think people are realizing like, oh, wow, a country as multicultural as Canada,
right,
that breeds a lot of talent and is finally being looked at. Like, we're going into like, I don't like to use this word, but like the trenches to find these guys that have always been looked down upon, maybe because they're a little too they're a little too cocky, or they have a certain type of swag to them, or how they speak, or how they, like, where their background is from. But if you look at the best players in the world, look at Ibrahimovic. He's always had that attitude, and these guys are the best in the world. Neymar, when they're on, I think that's what brings. I think we can't hinder the personality of a player, because that might be the reason why they're such a good player. Right. So I think we have to take it as the context as a whole. And I mean, right now it's going, like you said, this is only base. And I'm happy to see that a lot of the guys that I grew up playing who were overlooked, especially for youth teams, provincial teams, and we had to go to the universities to get scholarships and had to go through that route, are now main figures in the national team. So it's actually amazing how many people that came from college that are starting players in the national team. So, and you would have never thought. So I think that's really dope. I think for off the field, like we were talking about it before, is like just the marketing. How do we expose these players? Like we've seen Tajon, what he's doing in MLS, and he was in North American media, like Richie and North Kyle. But then when they moved overseas, I feel like Canada soccer just forgot about them. I think it's like, okay, because Canada is North America, I think we need to put a lot of emphasis in making sure like we continue to bring our players to light, just like how the Brazilians do, just like how the Americans do. They're always talking about Christian Pulisic and Chelsea or Brendan Aronson. I think we need to start talking about players that are across, like overseas, players that are in college still, that are still trying to get professional contracts, the Canadian Premier League, the USL. I think we need to dive deeper into our player pool and see what guys are doing. So that's my personal opinion.
It's a great point, and it's almost like you're reading my manifesto from my computer right here, because I'm always talking. I'm not kidding. I'm always talking in our head office at CPL about that. It's like, now, how do we get people to follow the CPL? It's the knock-on effect, right? It's about talking about Tajon and Alfonso, and then, okay, let's slide in a little bit of CPL discussion as well. Oh, okay, there's a Canadian Soccer League. That's the only way. It's the only way we're going to get the people to start to pay attention to it. And as usual, Kwame, you bang on.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, Kwame, it's funny to hear you talk about it, because I was the same way. I mean, like my dad back in the day played for the Vancouver 86ers and stuff, and I was never seen as good enough for the Vancouver Whitecaps for their academy and stuff. Never went. Luckily, went to play at Simon Fraser and had a good career. Had spent some time with the Whitecaps under 23s at the time, later on, and then the Seattle Sounders and stuff, and it was a blast. But again, we're reliant, at least back in our day, we were way more reliant on a very few number of people who, of course, have a subjective opinion, because all of us have a subjective opinion about the sport. Mm-hmm. It's kind of impossible for us to be completely objective through everyone. So that's pretty key. And I mean, if I were to look at it, I think off the field, the biggest thing that individual clubs could do is, I think, just try and connect a little bit more with their community. Like one of the cooler things that I saw when I was with the Whitecaps was we went down to play Portland. Well, Portland made sure that day was a field trip for 10,000 elementary school kids that got free tickets to the game. And the atmosphere was electric, and the kids didn't stop screaming for the whole 90 minutes. It was incredible. Luckily with Seattle and with their station down there, it's right in the community. Anyone can walk in and see. And I remember when I was down there, I'm walking out and kids are asking for my autograph. And I'm sitting like, no, that's Jordan Morris. Go get his. You don't want mine. You don't want mine, kind of thing. So it's like that whole thing where I think if we're able to kind of, all these clubs, if they're able to really dive into the community, you're going to start to see that ripple effect where more people are going to be paying attention. And again, hopefully that helps bring more people through the door and helps everyone kind of hire these full-time people. Because if you don't have someone looking into this stuff full-time, it's so difficult to be able to keep track, because we have way more guys playing pro now. There are so many more pathways. The player pool is expanding. Like, you need people full-time to really pay attention to everything and make sure that nothing slips through the cracks.
So true. It's a great point.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna ask a question, and it might, I'm trying to figure out how to put this. Because Canada is doing so well right now, I want to know what you see. What's the biggest difference between the Canadian soccer landscape, meaning audience, like players? Obviously, we just talked about the marketing side, and like media, how the players interact with media, and obviously the overall experience. How does it differ from the European audience or the UK audience? As you know, I know the media is very, very tough in England. They don't let anything slide. As you can see, that's why a lot of the players just don't say anything. But I want to know, like, what would you say are the differences between the Canadian media and how they interact with the players, and the UK media and how they interact with the players?
It's a really good question, and it's one for me that I guess it's a difficult answer because I feel like I'm part of it And I mean, you know me, Kwame. I don't talk from an ego point of view, but I just guess what I've developed nobody else is doing, I suppose. Like in terms of like with the players of the national team, right? That's what I'm trying to say is that I'd like more people to get more engaged with the players of the national team, like my Beyond the Pitch series that I'm doing with all the Canadian men's national team players. I think that is important. But I think to answer your question, I think when we look at the ecosystem from a grand level, you know, I think we need better access to these players. I think that's really important. I speak to tons of young journalists every month, and you know, I want to help these young journalists and help them go forward and do that. And I think that we need access to these players more. I bring them to the CPL because I say to them consistently, the CPL can give you so much work and so much training. You can just jump into a Canadian Premier League press conference and ask questions of Bobby Smaniotis or Kyle Becker or Marco Carducci and learn so much as a young journalist. You know, with no, I don't mean this disrespectful, but with a podcast or a website, come on in and earn your stripes and come on in and get experience. And I think that's fascinating. It's something you can't do at other levels of the leagues in North America because, you know, you need your accreditation and official documentation. And so I think that is certainly for good young journalists, a really good breeding ground, much like the Canadian Premier League is, right? Canadian Premier League is for Canadians. Well, it's for Canadian coaches, it's for Canadian fans, it's for Canadian media. So it goes across the board. But I think as a Canada soccer thing, all in all, I think we need more availability. I have so much admiration for the United States Soccer Federation and the way that they handle everything in terms of their relationship with their players, both men and women. What they've done with pay equity is something different, but that is unbelievably admirable. And also the way that they continue to have respect for their own media while understanding the media has to do a job. Right. So, you know, I'll give you an example. You guys remember Weston McKennie when he got sent home from the US camp, right? Mm-hmm. Weston McKennie got sent home for breaking curfew, and I believe it was during COVID. I'm not going to get into what he was doing. It's none of my business. But the top class, outstanding broadcast / journalists that covered that team got the story. They got the story and they published the story. And you know what else they were doing afterwards? They were still reporting on the team, and they were allowed back in the press conferences. And the people within that club, that US Soccer Federation, and the players, the staff, the coaches, more importantly, Greg Berhalter is a class act. They knew that those people had a job to do. They didn't bring them to the side and berate them and take their accreditation pass off them for breaking this big story to make their player look bad. They continue to welcome them in, and they develop relationships, and it works both ways. That's professionalism at the elite level from both sides. That's where we need to get into this in this country. And they have availability with Christian Pulisic, who wasn't playing very well for Chelsea, and they bring him over and they stick him up and they put him on the press conference because he is the face of US soccer. And they don't hide him. They don't say, "Oh, let's hide away." And Pulisic answers the questions. And he says what he needs to say. And sometimes it's controversial. But you know what? Back to Kwame's point. Everyone's talking about it. That's how you do it. You don't hide away without having press conferences and not say anything. And that's where we need to get in this country. And make these people, for lack of a better word, for good and for bad, and some like life. Sometimes they're going to say things and be amazing. Sometimes they're going to play well and be amazing. Sometimes they're going to say things that are controversial, but it doesn't make them a bad guy or a bad person. You know, I think that's really important that we get to that next level, Kwame.
Yeah, and just to add another side question, do you think it's because, like, if you see the NBA, or like how the NBA now is, players are so openly, like, they're so open and voice their thoughts and their opinions. Do you think it's because soccer is not really a player-driven sport? Whereas like the NBA, these are the best of the best, and there's only 400 people that are the best. But because there's so many soccer's a really, really global sport. I'm not saying the NBA is not. It's everybody has a subjective view where who's the best, where the best league is. The Germans are going to say the Bundesliga. The UK guys are going to say, you know what I mean? So is it because it's not really player-driven, and the guys at the top are not really voicing their opinions? Lionel Messi doesn't say a word.
Yeah.
Ronaldo, when he has media, he'll tell people he's the best. But do you think is that the discrepancy? Do you think is that the reason?
I think it's definitely the right thing. You bang on. It's so true. There's lots of reasons for that. Corporate sponsorship, imagery. They don't want to be going away from a lot of that, right? That's important for them. But the NBA has got great personalities, right? As you said, a player-driven league, and I know so many footballers have so much more to say. And I'd love to, and I certainly want to get that out. That's certainly what I've been doing with the Canadian men's national team players, sitting down with 35 minutes with Alphonso Davies. Again, this is not about me, Stefan Eustáquio, Junior Hoylett. I just released that interview with him today. Junior Hoylett, second of all time in Premier League appearances amongst Canadians, second of all time in goals for Canadians. This guy went to Blackburn in the northwest of England before he was a teenager, sacrificed everything, left Brampton, Ontario, went to Blackburn, went to Germany when he wasn't even 18 so he could play, so he'd get a work permit. This guy's story is remarkable as a boy who grew up in Canada, and no one knows the story. No one sits down and talks to these guys. It's hard to get access to these guys, but when you can get it, I want them to talk, because I think these people have got so much to say, and it's the only way Canadian soccer is going to go forward, is that these guys have more personalities coming out and talking about what they are, because the great guys, Kwame, many of them. This World Cup qualifying process worked because the guys, kids and older, had such great rapport because they're good people, and that ultimately was a massive part of their success.
I think it's pretty interesting what you say there too, where you're talking about like the U.S. soccer, and for me, like the biggest thing that I see that them follow, because that follows again the NBA. They're extremely critical. If a player plays well, every single analyst will give them their roses. If they don't, they're super critical. Same with NFL, every sport, and it's kind of interesting in this country. We can do it with hockey, no problem. They have no problem hammering any hockey player if it's bad, if it's, poor acting, if it's bad play, whatever. They'll kind of maintain it and keep it to that. Yet for soccer, we don't seem to do that, which is always kind of strange. I don't know if it's because we're trying to grow it to keep everything's rosy, bring more fans in. But I feel like for people who played, they're kind of like, they might not necessarily agree with it, but might go like, oh, I'm surprised they didn't go after this or go after that because they did in another sport.
Yeah, I'll tell you this, like, it's not always been this way. I mean, I can go back to stories about at TFC when they first started ruffling a lot of feathers, right? Because we call it how we see it. But I'll tell you this, a lot of people come to you later and at least they respect it. Because then Kwame will tell you this too, is like a player knows. Footballers, by the way, I think of all sports people in the world, men and women, don't get enough credit for how smart they are. People don't think that they're smart. They just think that they're footballers and their brains are in their shoes. But they are, the way that they read the game, their unbelievable commitment to excellence, fitness level, everything. They're smart. And you know what they also do? They see charlatans a mile away. So they know if you're not real. They know. Footballers know. That's why managers don't last 5 minutes when they go to teams, because eventually footballers will get them fired, because if they can't help them, they'll move them on. So players are very smart when it comes to that. So that's the point about the media, is that they'll sniff out the genuine ones very quickly, good or bad. And if you call them out, sometimes they'll respect you for doing it, because later when you compliment them, that'll mean even more than the people who don't do either and just sit on the fence.
No, for sure. I mean, that'd be a huge part of, the respect factor between the two, understanding that the footballer has a job to do, and so does the broadcaster or media personnel. And then neither can get what they need out of it without doing it properly. And then just kind of build off that a little bit. Like what did you see as kind of key differences? Obviously you spent time at the Score. That was probably for me all-time peak so far of broadcasting for the sport in Canada, with yourself and Charmin. And then even Sixera, when he jumped on for that one summer, I think it was the Euros and the Copa America that summer. And they happened to be on the same one. That was one of my favorite summers. And then obviously at TSN with Stevie, and then now at One Soccer with that crew.
Yeah, I mean, 2010 World Cup, we had Sid as well. We had FIFA World Cup tonight, which was pretty special as well. And then obviously Copa America. So, I think all of them are very different, right? So I was at the Score for 10 years and, we did it differently. Good or bad, different, indifferent, whether your preference or not. The suits were doing it, the channels were doing it differently in their suits, and and we did it on our couches, and we did it on our jeans and our sneakers and relaxed, right? Like that was what we did. And we appealed to the younger audience. We were the first ones to start reading tweets and social media back in 2008, right? Like we were doing that. So and then obviously that got taken over by Sportsnet. I moved over to TSN. It was very different, right? But at the same time, I still felt like we could still never talk down to people, just talk to people. Like we don't know everything, right? So it's always that conversational thing. So there were very different ways of doing it. And now with One Soccer, I think we're a bit more casual again. But I think for me, the mandate is always, Adam, is just make sure that we don't belittle things. I never want to be that person who's just going up there and saying, oh yeah, Alphonso Davies, he's a guy to watch. He's a really good player. Like tell me something else, right? Captain Obvious, right? Like I think if you, as I said, when I left TSN, we had crucial time at TSN when I was there that I never forget when, a top level producer said to us that we worry that you're getting a little bit too high end in your analysis. What about the soccer moms? And I'm like, these guys know what they're talking about too. And by the way, if they don't, they're going to catch up. That's what I said, right? Because they were like, the X's and O's and the complications and tactics. And, let's just go back and tell me why Man United's not doing very well. I'm like, well, no, I think we can figure this out, right? Like, so that was for me a really pivotal moment in Canadian soccer for us, is like, we got to teach and go forward. And that's what I tried to do, at TSN, is inform and teach people to go forward and push it forward. And that's what we're trying to do at One Soccer as a team now.
Yeah, man. I mean, the guys at One Soccer, I definitely think they look up to, especially my guy, Adam Jenkins, the most enthusiastic broadcaster right now. Whenever I'm watching a Canadian Premier League game, whenever I have time, oh man, you know it's him. He's hyped. That's that kind of energy that we need.
Super
within
talented.
Canada soccer. Yeah, 100%. And he's a great guy to talk to as well. I mentioned getting into chat with him, and hopefully we can get an interview going with Adam and those guys on One Soccer. But to continue, what do you think that we need to take from this past week? Obviously the rumblings that have been going on with the Canadian men's national team canceling their game and refusing to train, etc. I have friends that are obviously within the national team, but I kind of stayed away from asking those questions because it's a personal thing, and I'm not within the pool of players as well. So they're the ones that went through that qualification run. They're the ones that, obviously with everyone supporting them behind them, they're the ones that are with each other for most of the year, going through the ebbs and flows of obviously the World Cup qualification, the emotional highs, and because their expectation was to qualify. They wanted to qualify for 2022, and maybe the rest of the world didn't expect them to qualify. How does the outside looking in, or do you think the outside looking in affects the situation that's going on with the Canadians and the pay grade, etc.? Because probably everyone else is looking at them as like, oh, Canada made it, but no one was really expecting them to make it. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Does that affect the negotiations that's going on right now?
I think it plays a major part. I mean, John Herdman certainly didn't hint he initiated that when he talked about the fact that, they weren't ready for this. That was his words, not mine. Canada wasn't ready for this. Now, we do know past World Cup cycle players have told me that when they started a World Cup cycle in the past, they knew what they were going to get paid. They knew if they made it past one round or into the next round or into the World Cup, there's the cut. They already knew that. Now, this wasn't happening this time. And there are a number of reasons for that, right? We can get into the fact that the qualification process changed. It wasn't always going to be an oct. It wasn't, Canada at one point were going around some repechage tournament, playing all the others and trying to get to win that just to play a playoff with the fourth team to get through. So that was certainly a case. So the format has changed over and over again. That's COVID. So anyway, what's done is done. Ultimately, where we are right now isn't ideal for anybody, right? I think, as John Herdman again said, like there's been mistakes made on both sides. Though it's quite sad, really, that it wasn't necessarily the send-off the players deserved in Vancouver. It was the last game of a World Cup year in Canada before they go away, and they're not going to play here again before the World Cup. It didn't feel like that. It felt quite solemn, really. I think it wasn't really necessarily a celebration moment. And in the end, they won 4-0, and the kids got autographs with Alphonso, and there's many people who came away happy, which they should, after a difficult time. So yeah, it's been strange, Kwame, no doubt about it. There's lessons to learn on both sides. I think that ultimately there will be some resolution, and things happen for a reason. Ultimately, the women's team have quite rightly entered these negotiations and discussions for a reason, because they need to be involved in it too. And hopefully they find something, at the end of the day, that they can all be happy with. But I do think ultimately, the level of professionalism from Canada soccer side, has had a bit of a wake up call here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
for
as much
sure.
as much as we love football, obviously the wages is a big part of it. The more you pay the players, I think that's how it makes it more like makes it more intriguing. Like it makes people want to be involved in soccer a lot more. Just like the US, they're pumping money into their academies, etc. Like they have the whole Audi goal bonus for MLS academies, all that. So I think, yeah, money, people don't play. You don't initially start playing for the money, but when it becomes a job, yeah, that's the business part of comes into it. So I think a lot of people forget about that. Adam, you wanna ask this probably be our last question. Adam, you take it away.
Yeah, and again, just kind of looking at the situation, obviously being on the inside of it, are there any misconceptions from either side that you've kind of seen that fans probably need to know just about, what's something on that's either attributed to the players or the CSA in that regard, and kind of how the steps that we need to understand kind of as fans and as the community here about how we can support both? Because obviously if only supporting one or the other isn't going to help anyone and it's not going to rectify a situation, but just kind of like what are the misconceptions, and then how do we get behind both entities to kind of push everything forward?
Yeah, wow, it's a really good question. I'm not really sure what my words will mean. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that, but I'll certainly try. I mean, I'll do my best. I mean, misconceptions, first of all, and people may say that I have a little bit of bias in this answer, but it's really got nothing to do with it. In all the preparation I've done and speaking to everybody else, the discussion around the CSB deal in these negotiations is quite frankly a red herring. It really is just an added line and a little bit of a broken relationship of insecurity, figuring out, oh, well, we need you to tell us a little bit more about this as well. But ultimately, we shouldn't get lost here, us being the media, in terms of what the overall story is about World Cup bonus money. This is prize money. This is not CSB money. It's prize money. And it's like, and how much of a cut the players deserve, both female and male players. So I think that's ultimately the major sticking point in what needs to be negotiated here. I've heard other media outlets say it's time for the CSB deal to come back to the table and renegotiate and all of that. And that's not going to happen. Ultimately, Kwame is sitting here with us as a big proponent of this in terms of what the CSB money is doing to the development of the sport in this country, with the development of the Canadian Premier League and many other things. So, One Soccer and the commitment to what they've done on television to broadcast Canadian soccer like no other button before has certainly made a big part of that as well. So again, I wouldn't say that if I didn't believe it, guys. Take it at face value. So that's the only thing I would say. Ultimately, as I said, some of the players have, they ultimately are very passionate about this, and they, for them to cancel a game like that, I don't think they would have got to that point if they didn't think that what they're fighting for was really important. And I don't think they're thinking about just themselves. I think it's important to stress that they're really stressing that this is something that's needed for the future of the game in Canada.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, isn't the CSB deal, at least the way I read it, was really similar to the way the MLS and US soccer kind of grew together as well, where there was that kind of joint partnership where the US soccer would help in some regards and the MLS would help in some regards to kind of grow that. With the way I read it, it kind of seemed like it was a similar type deal between CSB and Canada Soccer.
Yeah, US soccer has some, right? States United Marketing. So that's these organizations need these things to go forward. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and then I mean, obviously, the idea would be, at least in the way I look at it from the outside, and it sucks right now, but it seems a little bit like the current Canada Soccer Association, a little bit. Not obviously, you talked about how previous ones knew exactly what kind of bonus money was coming in and all that. That should have been rectified. But as far as from an organizational standpoint, it kind of seems like the current one are taking the lumps for previous administrations a little bit, where they couldn't get necessarily enough funding over the line to be able to pay them what they'd want if they qualified for a World Cup and all that. But it could be like, and maybe more of the prize money this time needs to kind of be refinanced in to make sure that we can increase the level of professionalism and set a better foundation. But I mean, it's all kind of just ideas at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this is a conversation that we can definitely have continue. Like we can go on and on about this. I think it goes back to Christian's point that the players are not dumb. We understand the business side now. We see the marketing. We see how the brand of Alphonso Davies, a brand of Tate. Like, we see what we're bringing to the table. So I think it's okay for players to negotiate and try to see what they can help for the sport and for themselves. So before we sign off, KJ, I just want to ask you, we know that there's a lot of people that look up to you, even though you might not think so. Just like how professional athletes have fans, we're all fans of good reporters, genuine reporters such as yourself, and not just a reporter, journalist, men, like a man of football. What would you say to someone that looks up to you, that wants to get in the position that you're in right now? Obviously, you're still moving forward, still pressing forward. What's some advice that you'll tell to a young journalist?
Watch games closely and put your phone down. That's one that's what I would start with. That's what I work with my team on doing regularly. So when my team members are covering sports, when they're covering a game, and we have a correspondent-based coverage at the Canadian Premier League, so one of my guys or me is always covering one game. That person doesn't spend the time sitting on the phone or watching social media. The phone's on the ground or phone's away, and they're watching the game either on the screen or live. So watch games closely. Don't be afraid to generate your own opinions. It's a game about opinions, and don't cover it. Don't say you like a player because somebody else likes it. Go out there and generate your own opinion and tell me why you like that player or why you don't like that player. But watch really, really closely. Watch a lot of football and go to as many live games as you possibly can, and watch and watch and watch, and take notes mentally, computer or written down, because you will be surprised as you grow older what you will forget otherwise.
Oh man, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you as always, and I'm happy that you were our first guest. Honestly, I mean,
I didn't realize that. That's an honor, by the way.
Yeah,
it's a real honor.
Yeah, like this is something that, like, obviously me and Adam have been talking to each other for a couple months, a couple weeks, and this is something that we really wanted to do. Me being a player within the Canadian system, and him coming through the Canadian system as well, and both going to like having similarities and differences, being on the East Coast and him on the West Coast. I think this is something that I definitely wanted to do, a passion project, and I'm happy that I got to do it with Adam, and we're happy that we had you as our first guest. 100%.
Well, I'm thrilled to join you boys, and shows like this only help, right? Only continue to help pushing this forward. You guys bring a different perspective. Kwame and I have spoken many times about players and current players, more current players talking and doing shows. So count me in. I might be your first guest, but I'll also be a regular listener as well. So thanks again.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Christian. Really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
No problem.